This is Jocko Podcast number 210 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
And also joining us tonight is Dave Berke. Good evening, Dave.
Good evening.
And the last time that Dave was on, we discussed Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication 3-1, Tactics, which starts with a line that reads, "This publication is about winning in combat," which is an outstanding way to start off any publication of any kind. And we actually ended up covering that manual on a series of 4 podcasts, 187, 188, 189, and 190. And that definitely is an outstanding manual when it comes to winning in combat, for sure. It explains the concepts. It reveals the underlying philosophies. And there are other doctrinal publications from the Marine Corps on operations and on strategy and on campaigning. And there's manuals on intelligence and expeditionary operations and logistics and planning and command and control. There's a manual on the Marine Rifle Squad. They got manuals for everything. There's even a Marine Corps warfighting publication, 3-15.1, called Machine Guns and Machine Gun Gunnery, which is a 406-page manual, by the way. 406-page manual. This is the manual where you learn that, quote, "This machine gun supports both the offense and defense. It provides the heavy volume of close, accurate, and continuous fire support necessary to suppress and destroy enemy fortifications, vehicles, and personnel in support of an attack. The long-range, close defensive, and final protective fires delivered by this gun form an integral part of the unit's defensive fires." So they're going deep. They're going deep on machine guns and machine gun gunnery. Is there a title of any book in the world that has a gun in it more times? I don't know of any. It also shows you exactly how to fire from the bipod with a 240 Gulf. So, firing from the bipod. When firing from the bipod, the rear sight is raised. Assume a prone position behind the gun with the right shoulder into the weapon. The right hand grasps the pistol grip and manipulates the trigger. Place the left hand on the comb of the stock, palm down, with the cheek resting lightly against the cover and or the left hand. Both hands exert a firm, steady pressure to the rear during aiming and firing. Unlike the tripod, the bipod mount is relatively unstable. Elbows and upper torso may move. A good sight picture must be regained before firing each burst. So we're getting detailed. There's not much room for interpretation. We're getting the instruction that we need. And by the way, the Army also has a manual for machine gunners. The FM3 TAC 22.68 crew-served machine gun, which doesn't actually cover the 50 cal. It's got another manual for that. It doesn't cover the Ma Deuce, but it's still 430 pages long. So they are not playing around. And by the way, we salute all the machine gunners out there for what you do, laying down that suppressive fire. And we understand that manuals get granular and show us how to do a specific job. Now, the military does have leadership manuals as well, and we've covered a bunch of them, and they are solid in explaining some of the principles of leadership. But I always wanted something that was more granular, more detailed, more specific for leadership, something that explained the actual strategies and tactics to be used when leading people, the little maneuvers that you make up and down the chain of command. And so I wrote a book, and it's called Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual, and it is released January 14th, 2020, and I wanted to review it for you all right as it comes out to highlight what the book is, how you can use it, and what the book will do for you as a leader. And since I work with Dave all the time, first in the Battle of Ramadi and now at Echelon Front, and since he's been on the podcast multiple times, and since he listens to the podcast, and since he was the first person that I gave this book to read, I figured it made sense to have him on here so he could help me introduce the book to the world. So, Dave, thanks for coming on, man.
Good to be here, man.
You got a couple versions. You got the early versions.
I did. I got a couple early versions.
Yeah. I was just spilling thoughts onto pages like this, this. And then I started to formulate them into categories and eventually turned them into this. So, leadership strategy and tactics. We're going to go to the book. And I kind of had to do a little bit of an explanation here in the beginning of the book, just to explain sort of what's going on here, who I am, well, it goes like this. Who am I to try and teach leaders how to lead? Where did I learn leadership? Much of my leadership education was luck. I say luck because there were a few fortunate coincidences that gave me the right frame of mind, the right teachers, and the right opportunities to learn. One of the ways I was lucky and that made me focus on leadership was the fact that I wasn't really that naturally talented at anything in particular. As a little kid, I wasn't the fastest or strongest or smartest. I was never great at shooting a basketball, kicking a soccer ball, or throwing a baseball. I didn't win any races or have a shelf of trophies and ribbons from sports. My report card was never exceptional either. I might have done well in a class if I was interested, but I usually wasn't, and my grades reflected that. I was average across the board. Coming out strong. Coming out strong. Average across the board. That's where we're at. And this is where it kind of ties in. So even from a young age, I needed to get others with more talent and more skill to do what I needed them to do. I needed to lead. Of course, I didn't think of it as leadership. I just thought I was making things happen and contributing by getting people to work together, to support one another as we moved toward a common mission. Now, maybe that mission was building a fort in the woods or planning a mock military assault with squirt guns on another group of friends. And this is real. Like I remember when it was time to build a fort, when it was time to organize an assault on some other group, I'd be like, all right, hey, this is what we need to do. And that's because I knew that little Johnny could run faster than me. I knew that Billy could scale that wall better than I could. But I could take a step back and say, okay, this is how we should do it. This would be the best way to build this sport. This is what we need to do. So whatever the task was, I generally found myself giving direction to people who were stronger, faster, or otherwise more capable than I was. That seemed to be where I could help the most and the one area in which I could perform with a higher level of competency. I also always had a rebellious streak, which I think everyone has. I shouldn't say that. I think many people, because how much of a rebellious streak did Kyle Carpenter have? Like, he didn't have much of a rebellious streak. I mean, he had enough to join the Marine Corps, but when you listen to him, he's like, yeah, he wasn't looking to rebel. He was just on the path from day one. Kind of got it. So maybe it's not every kid, but me, yeah, I had a little rebellious streak, and maybe it was another way for me to leave a mark. I wouldn't conform to the way other kids acted. I acted differently, listened to hardcore and heavy metal music, and had a hardcore attitude about things. That attitude set me apart from the pack. Once I was on the outside of the normal kids, I was detached from them, so I observed. Looking in from the outside, I garnered a better understanding of the people I was watching. I saw their emotions, their cliques, and their drama unfold from a detached position. I learned. So that's an interesting point, too, that I thought about while I was putting this together. I remember, okay, so you got the kids. Movie reference, Echo Charles, Breakfast Club.
Yes, sir.
So you got the stereotypical kids, right? The jock.
Yeah, wrestler.
The rebel guy.
Yep, John Bender.
The preppy or the popular girl.
Yep.
The
Princess,
nerd.
We'll say.
Princess. The nerd.
Yeah.
And then what was the black-haired girl considered?
Oh, like a recluse, like a hermit, like an outcast girl.
Artsy, right? Give me artsy. Artsy girl?
Yeah. Actually, she was artsy because remember she drew that picture of the snow cabin and then she made her dandruff go on it
to snow.
as snowflakes. Yeah, you were correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so artsy, jock, princess, popular, nerd, and kind of stereotypical rebel. Yeah. So at my school, we had all those kids, right?
Yeah.
And I really wasn't in any of those groups. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of had friends in each one of those groups, which is kind of weird in its own right. I was friends with some of the popular kids. I was friends with some of the burnouts. I was friends with some of the metalheads. I was friends with some of the prep. I was kind of friends, had a couple friends, but I wasn't really considered to be in any of those groups, which meant I was actually watching them, even from a young age. I was going, oh yeah, I see how the burnouts are. I see how their little hierarchy is, which is different, but it allowed me to kind of look and learn. Strange.
No, man, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a similar experience in high school. Look, first, just real quick, that act of rebellion, joining the military is an act of rebellion.
Oh yeah, it definitely was for me.
Kyle Carpenter is such a great dude. He's just a good guy. But anybody that does that is doing something that's totally counter to what 99% of the world's doing. There's no question about that.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, his mom was definitely against it, we'll say, but that's a cool thing about Kyle is he talked them through it. He eventually was good enough to be like, hey, this is what I really want to do. And he went to college to kind of say, okay, let me try college, and then he moved in that direction. I joined the Navy. I didn't even tell my parents. I just joined.
Yeah. Your rebellion might.
And then I told I noticed when I wrote this, I was reading a little section. I said I was talking to my dad, and I had already joined the Navy when I told my dad. I said, yeah, hey, by the way, I joined the Navy. And I think he was just kind of stoked that I was not going to go to jail or just be an idiot for the rest of my life. Yeah, it's interesting how, as I reflect back, just being on the outside gave me maybe the initial idea of being detached and looking at things from a different perspective, only because I wasn't quite any of those groups. Interesting. All right. Continuing on, joining the Navy was still the best thing I could have done. It gave me a blank slate and clear direction. No one in the Navy cared that I didn't have the best grades in high school. It didn't matter that I wasn't the best athlete. No one was concerned about where I was from, what my parents did, or anything else about my history. They shaved my head, gave me a uniform, and told me what I needed to do to be successful. Make your bed like this, fold your underwear like that, polish your boondockers until they look like mirrors. If you could follow the rules and do what you were told to do, you'd be put in a leadership position. I did follow the rules, and I did what I was told to do, and it paid off, and I was made a squad leader in boot camp. What does that mean? Tactically, nothing. But it meant a lot to me at the time. I mean, think about it. A squad leader in Navy boot camp. That is a very minimal leadership role. But for me, at that time, it was a role. It was a leadership
What are
role.
there, 3 squads? I
think there was more. I think there was 6 squads because we had a big open bay barracks, and I think there was 3 squads on each side, because you were basically grouped by your bunk beds.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, you needed a squad leader. So I probably had, 15 people in my squad. And there was another guy who was from New England, and he was a wrestler, and he was going to be a SEAL, and he ended up being a SEAL. And he's an awesome guy. But he ended up being the master at arms because he had been to college, and he, so he was. And then the guy that was the recruit chief petty officer, the RCPO, so the senior of all of the recruits. This guy he had turned down his commission or something like that. So he did ROTC for 4 years. The Navy paid for 4 years of college, and he said, I don't want to get a commission. And they said, cool, you're going to be an enlisted guy for 2 years. And that's what he did, which is a really, look, I don't want to say it's a bad call, but that seems like a bad call to me. He got his commission.
Yeah.
Or he was ready to get his commission. Now, who knows, because everyone in boot camp lies to each other. when it comes to like, you meet all these guys that were
there.
Yeah, I was just about to be, I just got drafted by whatever, the Miami Dolphins, but I really wanted to serve, so I enlisted in the Navy. You're looking at that guy thinking, wow, what position were you going to play at 117 pounds? But yeah, so I'm not sure if my RCPO was actually, like, maybe he got in trouble, right? You go to 4 years of college, you're supposed to get your commission, and you get a DUI or something, and then they're like, hey, you're not getting a commission, but you do owe us 2 years of enlistment. So he was there. He was a squared away guy. I don't remember what happened to him. The Master at Arms, who was a total stud, great guy, awesome wrestler in college, and he was the Master at Arms. And then I, with no experience, was a squad leader. So my first leadership role, and I was stoked,
dude. Totally, that's something.
Yeah. Buds was the same way for me. I still wasn't great at any particular skill. Not the best runner or swimmer. Not great at the obstacle course. But I could do what I was told. I could play the game. And I wasn't going to quit. Some people say that everyone thinks about quitting during Buds. I never did, not for a second. That thought never crossed my mind. Hell Week, a 5-day block of continuous physical training with almost no sleep whatsoever, and which causes the highest number of people to quit, was actually relaxing for me. Because during Hell Week, nothing is timed. During all other facets of Buds, students are constantly on the clock. Timed runs, swims, and obstacle course evolutions take place every day. If you miss the time and fail one of them, you're on the bubble. And if you fail again, you're out. That's what it was when I went through. It was stressful. But during Hell Week, nothing was timed. You just had to keep going. You just had to not quit. And for me, that was the easy part. Pretty straightforward. That's a good skill to have. It's like the other thing. Genetically, I don't have to sleep a lot. And I picked the perfect career for that. Like, I'm saying I wasn't good at anything, which is true. Not the best runner, middle of the pack runner, middle of the pack swimmer, middle of the pack on the obstacle course. But, and I didn't really think about the not sleeping thing, but that is something that I had. And I didn't really realize it at that time. But when I got done with Hell Week, I remember my roommates were beat up, and tired. And I remember I slept for, like a solid 8 hours or something. And I got up and I was doing 8-count bodybuilders. And I was like, I'm ready to rock and roll. And they were like, oh. Yeah. So good times. When I got done with Buds, I checked into SEAL Team 1. Was fired up, as all of us were, who were checking into that sacred place of war heroes and legends. The Master Chief of the Command, the highest ranking enlisted SEAL at Team 1, welcomed us aboard. No one here cares that you made it through Buds. We all did. It doesn't mean anything here. You have to prove yourselves and earn your trident. So keep your mouth shut, your ears open, and don't forget anything, and be on time. Any questions? The trident was the gold insignia worn on the uniform, which indicates you're a SEAL. To receive our tridents, we had to go through a 6-month probationary period and then go through a written and oral review board with the senior enlisted personnel at the team. We were all nervous about that, and the Master Chief provided no comfort whatsoever. In the early 90s, and again, I'm skipping through chunks of the book just to kind of get to the meat. In the early 90s, when I got to SEAL Team 1, the training progression was different from how it is now. Back then, once on board a team, you were eventually assigned to a SEAL platoon. This is where you would actually learn to be a SEAL. Up until that point, the training wasn't tactical. In Buds, you don't learn very much about the actual job of being a SEAL. You learn how to be cold, wet, and tired, and miserable, and not to complain about any of it. But you don't learn any of the job skills that make you into a professional operator. Those skills were taught to you once you were in a SEAL platoon. There you learned through a fire hose. There was so much knowledge needed, so many skills to develop, so many tactics to understand, you felt as if you would never know it all. But like the rest of the new guys, I listened and learned every single day. In my first 3 platoons, I learned a few key concepts that stuck with me for the rest of my career. And they were also the base upon which I built most of the principles I ended up teaching to the rest of the SEAL teams and eventually to companies, businesses, and organizations around the globe. These are examples of the lucky moments I referred to earlier. I was in the right place at the right time with the right frame of mind to learn what I did. Then I was lucky enough to have other experiences to overlay what I had learned and slowly, subconsciously begin to formulate a system of leadership that I was then lucky enough to apply on one of the most challenging battlefields in the world, the Battle of Ramadi in the summer of 2006. When I returned from that deployment, I took over the training for the West Coast SEAL teams, where I formalized, codified, and transcribed what I had learned. But the roots of everything I eventually wrote down originated in a very non-traditional but highly effective learning environment, the SEAL platoon. Yeah, so that's the opening, kind of a little, what is it? An excerpts of the opening of the book, just to kind of, if people have no idea who I am, hey, this is who I am.
Yeah. The biggest takeaway from that, because most of the people listening, just like me, aren't SEALs and aren't going to be SEALs. The thing that you said that I think is the most important of all that is the thing about frame of mind. Because what happens in the circumstances and all, you can't control any of those things. But everybody's going to be exposed to some things in their life. And if you have the right frame of mind, you can actually learn from it. You were talking about being in high school. It isn't just that you had different groups of friends. If you're like me, which I think you were, even in high school, you were looking and saying, I can see the glide path for that group. It's not guaranteed, but if they keep down this road, I could tell in high school where these different groups were likely going to go. Some appealed to me, some did not appeal to me. And even in high school, if you have the right frame of mind, you can actually start to learn. The biggest problem with that is I was an idiot in high school, and I didn't have the right frame of mind. You can't control those lessons, but if you actually have just a tiny bit of willingness to just kind of pay attention to what's going on around you, you don't have to be in the SEAL teams to get these same lessons. They're all out there in life, everywhere. And that would be, people always ask me, if you could go back and do it all over again, what would you change? And I'm like, I usually say nothing. I actually would try to tell young Dave Berke, hit your frame of mind, just pay a little more attention to what's going on around you, because it's all out there, even in high school. Yeah. It's all there, man.
Yeah. I got asked this the other day. I was getting interviewed or something, and I've been asked it before, and it's a similar kind of concept, right? The question was like, what was the moment where this all kind of came together? And I kind of wanted to give a dramatic, a dramatic answer, a poignant answer. Oh, I remember it was a rainy day. And I was like, no, every one of these things is a slow build. And like, you don't even know, you don't have the right frame of mind, right? You don't have the right frame of mind to say, oh, this is what's happening right now. But you can look back. That's what I'm doing now. Is even writing that forward, looking back at my life, saying where did I come to these conclusions? Because at some point I definitely did. At some point I recognized these things, but it was I shouldn't say that. At some point over time, I got to a point. I arrived at a point. Now that is true. When and you've heard me tell the story of taking over the training for the West Coast SEAL teams, and I went out on that training operation. It was a total disaster, and I went back to my barracks room that night and wrote down the 4 laws of combat. That's it right there. Like, that was what happened. But when I wrote down the 4 laws of combat for the first time, I wasn't trying to figure them out. I wasn't trying to see what they were. I knew what they were, and I just had to write them down. I had learned them over and over again from a bunch of different people in a bunch of different ways, and so now it was, okay, cool. How can I explain these to the rest of these guys that are going to be coming through this training where they can take them and implement them quickly? Yeah. So unfortunately, there's no point. Now, my curiosity is when someone gets fed this information now, right? When someone that's at the basic school in the Marine Corps listens to the podcast that we did, that series of podcasts, and goes, do they get just a hyper move forward? Because I look at it and think, man, if I would have had this podcast when I was younger, I'd have been a million times in a better position. Do people get a hyper boost, do you think?
I bet you some people do. But I still think that you're fighting against some of the human nature that I'm not even convinced that Dave Berke in a time machine would still have the maturity, even being told exactly how this could work in your favor, to have the frame of mind to listen to it. But there are undoubtedly some folks, I guarantee you, that are seeing this and go, holy crap, without this, my life would be different. And there's still a whole bunch of people that you can hit over the head and they're not going to absorb it, and they have their own timelines. But you can see when people get dialed in. And in the military, I mean, those culminating events, like you were just talking about, you get a couple of them in your career. You get maybe 2 or 3 if you're lucky. Some people get 1. A lot of people don't get any. I'm in touch with a pretty good number of guys going through the basic school on social media and whatnot, and they are so much more dialed in than I ever was. So much more dialed in. And I think, that's a combination of things. I started in the peacetime Marine Corps, and I think it's a different viewpoint, and they started in wartime Marine Corps. But those kids seem to be way more dialed in, and they're absorbing this and paying attention to this.
Even Jason Gardner at some point was saying, I think it was when he was on the podcast, he was saying like, hey, he started adjusting. He was a Master Chief.
Yeah.
And he was adjusting his game. He was listening to the podcast and he was like, yep, here's what's going on. Yeah. Here's what's going on. He's like, and so his mind was open enough. It reminds me, I was, I don't know what age I was, but I wanted to get a new bike. And I was at that age where, I grew up in a small town, and if you were going to ride somewhere, it was it was work, right? It was more than a 3-minute bike ride, And I think I had saved up whatever, $70 or something, and I asked my dad, "Hey, I really need a new bike. Can we split the cost or whatever?" And he says, "Okay, so cool." Because what does that mean for him? It means doesn't have to worry about driving around. It means basically, I'll leave him alone. So I go and we go to the bike store, and I go to get the bike, and I'm going to get a BMX bike, and I'm at that age where I could get a 10-speed. So that it was that point, like I'd never even had speeds before, but all of a sudden I'm old enough, so I was probably 12 or something, where I could get a 10-speed, with the curved down handlebars.
Totally. Yeah.
And my dad's thinking, yeah, you got a bike 3, 4, 6 miles, 5 miles, whatever, you're going to want this 10-speed.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm like, no, I want this BMX bike. So he ends up, you can see, looking back at the conversation, he's just looking at me thinking to himself, you're an idiot, you're going to want this bike. And I said, no, I definitely want this BMX bike because I'm going to go off-road or whatever. And sure enough, we get the BMX bike, and 2 days later, after my 4th 6-mile bike ride into town, I'm thinking I wanted that 10-speed. So this is the problem with life. The problem with life is that there's certain lessons that only life can teach you. Now, what I hope is, like when you give me that feedback about the basic school, like what I hope is you go, oh, okay, yeah, there's some lieutenants going there, and I get the same thing, guys in the teams right now, the young JOs in the teams. I get Army. We have all kinds of Army guys. Even in Australia, that was cool. A bunch of Army guys that were coming up saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. Thank you. Yep, learn this, learn that. So I think you can make more rapid progress if you have the right frame of mind going in.
Without a doubt. And there's more out there now than there was to be able to figure that out sooner. And there are guys and gals out there, certainly in the military, doing it way sooner than I did.
Yeah, it's the most hard. In the SEAL teams, when you get done with a job, like you get done with being an assistant platoon commander, and now you're ready to be good at it, you're not allowed to do it anymore. Right. It's over.
Totally.
By the time you have it figured out, you're done with it.
Yep.
It's platoon commander, hey, all right, I think I've got this dialed now. It's over, and it's time to become a task unit commander. By the time you feel good about being a task unit commander, okay, I'm sorry. And I was super lucky. Again, see, I talk about luck a lot. So I was a prior enlisted guy. When I was an assistant platoon commander, the only person in my platoon at SEAL Team 2 that had more experience than me was the platoon chief, who was another guy from Team 1 that we kind of grew up together in the teams. He was a little bit more, he'd been in the teams a little bit longer than me, but not too much longer. So we were like the experienced guys. When I was a platoon commander, same thing. Like my platoon chief had been in for probably an extra 6 months longer than me, but after that it was just a bunch of basically guys that had been in for 6 years. We'd been in for 13 or 14 done. And then when I was a task unit commander, it was like Tony Efrati, and he had been in for probably 2 or 3 years longer than me. But then after that, it was just people that had been in for less than half the time and half the amount of experience. So that's luck. You know, so when I'm doing a task unit commander now, I'm talking about how I was developing my skills even as a task unit commander. I had been in for 15 years. Imagine a normal task unit commander that's only been in for 6 years, or no, I guess they've been in for 7 years or 8 years. That's a normal task unit commander. I've been in for 15. I'd been an instructor at SEAL Team 1 in the training department. I'd done land warfare trip after land warfare trip. I'd done CQB trip after CQB trip. I taught everything. And that was when I was a young single guy too. I was in the training command. Guess what trips I went on?
All of them.
Totally. Like, oh, you need someone to go out to the desert? Cool, I'm in. You need someone to go to this new mount facility that we've never taken a platoon? Cool. Yeah, I'm going.
Yeah.
No factor. So that's why I was so lucky because, and this is another thing, when you're an instructor, you're de facto detached. So now I'm watching these JOs go through and I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's making all kinds of mistakes. Here's what, because he's all caught up in it. Whereas I can see everything because I'm watching him and then I can connect the dots. Oh, when you can see everything. Matter of fact, I was talking to Andrew Paul about this. Andrew Paul was going through something as a reserve, because he's a reservist in the teams, and he was going through some training, but he was observing, and he's like, yeah, I could see everything. And I go, yeah, man, yes, that's it. That's the mindset you have to have. So that's why, I like to emphasize the fact that I was very lucky. Even the frame of mind that I had wasn't because I was advanced beyond the other people. It was I got lucky that I had a little bit more. I wasn't more senior, but I had more time. I had more experience, and those experiences early on opened up and put me in the right frame of mind, luckily. So what I do then in this book, I go through these first 3 SEAL platoons, which are very, there's this kind of, does this happen? I guess it happens in everything. When you learn something for the first time, but this happens in the teams all the time. The way people learn something for the first time is the way they think is correct forever.
For sure.
And it takes like a beat down to get it out of them.
Dude, unlearning that, yeah. It's this, I think it's probably the same everywhere, but certainly in aviation too. When you learn it from somebody else, because first of all, the guy teaching you think is a god, because he's teaching you. You don't know anything about him other than he's the teacher, so he must be better than everybody at this. And when you learn it and you figure it out, that is the answer forever.
I had 2 guys that were like Vietnam era, and one of them was saying to do something some way, and I knew it was wrong, which is crazy to think about, right?
Yeah.
But what happened was I'd done 2 back-to-back ARG deployments, which is out on a ship with the Marine Corps, with the Navy. We're doing over the beach all the time. Every operation we did was from the ship to the ribs boats, from the ribs to Zodiacs, from the Zodiacs across the beach. I mean, I did it over and over and over. I did so many over the beach ops. Over the beach ops are so. Did you ever do over the beach ops?
Negative.
They're so ridiculously hard. I mean, everything, like, you're gonna swim in, so everything is gonna be wet. All your radios are going to be, and this is before we had waterproof radio, so everything had to be waterproof properly. Your weapons are going to get trashed. I mean, you're going to be freezing. It's going to be there's waves. It makes everything. I want to give an accurate assessment. I would say that if you compare to, like, hey, we're going to take a helicopter to this target and we're going to land and we're going to patrol in, compared to we're going to take boats and we're going to go over the beach and swim in, I think it's probably, I would say 6 times harder. It's 6 times harder because of, maybe 4 to 6 times harder. It's that much harder. I'm thinking about the preparation that you'd have to do and the worries that you'd have, and then where you'd have a problem. Like, let's face it, once you're on the ground, you're not going to have a problem. You're like, we got this. You're bringing the boats in at night. You're sending swimmer scouts in to go there and signal that the beach. I mean, you're losing people, bro. It's crazy. And then you're swimming in. There's waves. Your boats can get turned over. Your motors can fail. There's just total. It makes everything so much harder. So I had this Vietnam era guy, that was saying to do something a certain way. And I'm not going to get into the tactics of it, but he was saying to do a thing a certain way. And I knew that it was wrong because I had just got done with 2 ARG platoons where I did mission after mission after mission. And I knew that that was not the right thing to do. And the other Vietnam guy said, hey, man, he's wrong. He's wrong. Just play the game a little bit. And the actual thing that he told me was people don't always remember things right. He was just being merciful about it. He wasn't being a jerk. He was just like, look, people don't always remember things right. So but the way you learn something in your first platoon. So this guy probably learned, the guy that was telling us to do something a certain way, probably learned this from somebody somewhere along the way, and just thought it was the right way to do things. And I had learned through actual experience, like, hey, you do this enough times, go over the beach, go to Red Beach at Camp Pendleton in the middle of the winter when there's a 8-foot swell and you're getting cleaned out. You learn, man. You learn what to do and you get good at it. And I think that the way people learn things for the first time is it leaves a mark on people, and it's very hard to change their minds. So you got to be careful of that. There's probably is there a bias around that, Echo Charles? Like an official bias? Like the way you learn something for the first time, are you always biased towards thinking that's correct? Is that an official type of bias?
Not that I can think of, but it's very possible, yeah.
Okay, so we have a possible bias.
Possible bias.
Dude, I think that's really hard to undo. Really hard to undo.
Yep.
I saw that all throughout my career in a whole bunch, not just in flying, a whole bunch of different things. People wrap their heads around that, and it's really hard to undo that.
Yeah. I saw that all the time. And I saw it in myself. And as soon as I saw it myself, I recognized, okay, this is just what you learned, and what you learned can be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's the frame of mind we were talking about before. You and I, we talk about all the time is the phrase of question everything. And it's not question everything to be a jerk about things. It's actually question yourself more than anything is, do I not actually understand this the way I think I do? Does that guy know something or have seen something or experienced something that maybe I haven't? And the questioning is what it is actually questioning yourself more than anything is what I know actually correct? And I think that's part of the reason why it's so hard to undo that, is that people are convinced they understand it, and it's really hard to undo that. The questioning is yourself of, is this right? And a lot of people don't have the frame of mind to do that.
Yeah, it's a trap.
It is a trap.
It's a trap. You got to be careful of it. So, getting back to the book here, in this part, section 1, foundations. This is, I go through kind of these first fundamental 3 platoons where I learned, and the reason I went on this whole tangent about learning things for the first time is because this is where I saw these certain principles for the first time. And again, it wasn't like I saw the principle and was like, oh, there it is, I got this. It was like, this is where the seed got planted and it started to grow. The first platoon, the first section here is called detach. It was in my first platoon that I learned the power of being able to detach myself from the chaos and mayhem going on, take a step back and see what was actually happening. I was lucky that it happened the way that it did. So I go through the entire evolution of me learning that. And that is one of those moments where I absolutely remember it happening. So if the guy would have asked me, hey, when did you learn to detach? Instead of asking me broadly, hey, when did all this stuff come together? I couldn't answer that. But when I learned to detach, absolutely remember it. On an oil rig, doing training, no one's making a call. I end up making the call. My second platoon, what I learned in my second platoon had a mutiny. Mm-hmm. And I saw the difference between arrogance, and I saw humility, and I saw the stark difference into what following someone that's arrogant was like and following someone that is humble is like. And I started with the most arrogant platoon leader, and we had a mutiny, and we rebelled against him, and he got fired. And then we ended up with the most humble and knowledgeable and squared away platoon commander. And the attitude that we had with the arrogant guy, I don't think we sabotaged on a regular basis. But there was like we'd be doing a training mission that he had forced his plan down our throat. We didn't want that thing to succeed. We wanted to prove him wrong. And I don't know if that was always a conscious thing. I think most of the time it was subconscious, but no doubt we didn't want to follow him. And think about how disturbing that is. You're in a SEAL platoon, and the platoon commander, there's not one single guy in the entire platoon that actually wants to follow that guy.
Yeah.
And this is the frame of mind thing. I had to trace this back. I didn't say what? I didn't say we don't like him because he's arrogant. I wasn't smart enough to figure that out. I just knew that we didn't like that guy.
Yeah.
We don't like that guy. And what made it so clear was when the next guy came in to take his place, and he's super humble. And even then it didn't strike me. It wasn't until I actually thought about it from a leadership perspective. Why did we hate that guy and wouldn't want to follow? No one in a SEAL platoon wants to follow their leader. That's disgusting.
Yeah.
And then you get another guy, same group, same SEAL platoon, exact same guys, and you get a humble guy that gives ownership, and all of a sudden we will do anything for this guy and to make sure that we don't let this guy down.
Yeah. But when people are going to get the book when they read it, there's more in there and I won't give it too much away, but you talk in more details. There's other things about the lessons that, in looking back on, you can call those luck too, but you were actually lucky that your boss in that very first story didn't crush you and just destroy you and wipe out the opportunity to learn that lesson when you made that call. Because some bosses could have just worn you down and put you in a position to never do it again. You're actually lucky that on that second platoon, that mutiny story, you're actually lucky in some ways that they let you know that, hey, we don't do this.
Oh,
so there's
sure.
there's all these other layers of things in there. It isn't just that, hey, we had a bad boss and then we got a good boss. It's actually that you had the frame of mind, and we keep saying that over and over again, to look back and you didn't get validated like, oh yeah, well, you have a problem, just come to me and I'll take care of it and these problems go away. Yeah. It was like, no, you go back to work. And so there's other pieces in there too.
I got to cut you off because you go back to the first example. And this is why luck is important. Because the first example is we're on this oil rig and no one's making a decision. I take a step back and I make a call. And to your point, I didn't get crushed. I didn't get told shut up. I didn't get told, hey, new guy, you need to shut up and do what you're told to do. The fact that no one did that to me made me say, oh, okay, this is a good thing. Yeah. So that is luck. Because believe me, you have a SEAL platoon of 16 guys. The chances that there's a browbeater, I didn't even know what the word browbeater was. That is an actual type of human being, right? I'm surprised there wasn't one in the Breakfast Club, a browbeater. You know what I mean? Actually, I guess there was. What about the principal? What was his name? Echo Charles, this is your moment of truth right here.
His name
Becker? Decker?
No, it was... drawing a blank. Bro, I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
But what's a browbeater?
A browbeater is someone when you give your idea and they just come at you. I mean, they're just throwing offense. They're just punching you in the face with, you come and say, hey, do you think it'd be good to start releasing the podcast on Tuesdays? That's one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard.
Gotcha.
So you know what? Actually, you haven't even thought. If you even thought through that, you haven't thought through that, because if you would have thought through that, you'd realize that Wednesday is the day when people are waiting for the podcast. If we put it out on Tuesday, you know what? Actually, don't come to me with any more ideas that don't make any sense whatsoever. Validate them through common sense before you approach me, because it's actually a waste of my time. It's a waste of your time. It makes you look stupid. That's what a browbeater is. They just bring it.
That came real natural. You don't, by the way.
Yeah, well, it's kind of built up over a while.
I see. Understood.
So you have a browbeater. If I would have had a browbeater in that first platoon, and actually, there was a couple guys that were borderline browbeaters.
For sure.
And for whatever reason, probably because it was the right thing at the right moment, they decided not to beat me down. So is that luck? Yeah, that is luck. Now, the second story, and again, as you mentioned, like the details of these stories, I put a lot of details so people could really learn what I learned.
Yeah.
That mutiny we had, the arrogant platoon commander's out of line, takes a swing at one of the enlisted guys, tries to hit one of the enlisted guys. We break him up. And again, I explain this in the book. People getting in a fight in a SEAL platoon this is not a big deal. This is a violent group of dudes that are on all kinds of they got all kinds of testosterone running through their blood. Like this is a gang, you know. And okay, So it's not that big of a deal. But when it's the platoon commander that no one likes and that no one respects and that is totally arrogant, all of a sudden we turned on him like, boom, now we had something. But even then, to your point, Dave, the commanding officer wasn't like, okay, guys, thank you for the input. I'll get rid of him. He goes, you guys, this sounds like a mutiny. We don't have mutinies in the SEAL teams or in the Navy. Get out of here. Go do your jobs. It's like, okay. Like, well, that was not this is not normal. And then luckily, that commanding officer was smart enough to actually dig into it further, and he relieved the guy. Got fired. He fired him. So, yeah, and that is luck. It's luck that the commanding officer, number one, told us, shut up, do your job. And number two, he was smart enough to say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of this guy. Those are lucky circumstances. So that contrast, another thing that was lucky. If I would have had the horrible platoon commander and then an okay one, I may not have noticed. If I would have had an okay platoon commander and then a phenomenal one, I may not have noticed. I went from one end of the spectrum, from the worst platoon commander that I could imagine to the best platoon commander that I could imagine. And it's just like anything else, right? We need to, as human beings, there needs to be some discrepancy for us to notice it, right? There needs to be some contrast. There was a big enough contrast that even my dumbass at whatever 22 or 23 years old went, oh, I see what's going on. I see what's going on. And that second platoon commander, the good one, that's actually the seed that started in my mind of, oh, he's an officer. He was enlisted like me. I'm enlisted like he was. Maybe I could become an officer. Mm-hmm. Just like this weird, because I wouldn't have even imagined that. It wasn't even something that I thought about. It wasn't like, hey, I need to become an officer. Never even crossed my mind, because we were, the enlisted, the E5 Mafia at SEAL Team 1. Yeah, we didn't want to be officers. We didn't like officers. It was that whole attitude.
Yeah. There's so much detail, though, that those details are really important. And the takeaway still is you still have to be looking for that stuff, and you can now if you can look for that. That contrast is actually out there, and I know you can't cover everything in the podcast, but those details, even in the book, the way you wrote it, each one of those details is something to pay attention to. Those little things. So when you read this, you have to read every line and every piece of that, because there's a takeaway from each one of those. The contrast is there if you know to look for it, and the biggest problem, certainly for me, and I'm sure is you just don't know to look for it, and luckily those things happen with enough contrast for you to recognize it or even look back on it. You gotta know to look for it.
Yeah, and I think what we do now, we don't need to see. We can see little gray area. We can go, oh yeah, well, here's what's going on here. Yeah. We don't need to see someone that's a total arrogant person that's only my way or the highway. We don't need to see all that. We can see someone that's leaning in that direction and say, hey, you know why you're getting this pushback here? Here's why. It's just a little pushback because you're doing this, and we get to see that easier because we're looking for it.
Yeah.
But whether I would have seen this out of the gate without that broad contrast, probably not. No. Too dumb. So then we get to the third platoon, and this is where, again, I go into a lot of details on the story of what actually happened that you can pick apart. You can say, oh, yeah, that's what that was. But fundamentally, I did the same thing I did in that first platoon where I made a call. I made a decision. I was detached. I was doing the right thing. I saw what call to make, and I made a call. And once I made the call, the platoon commander was like, hey, why did you do that? And I said, well, I reviewed in my mind the cocky, arrogant, the ego. My ego was the immediate voice that popped up. The Terminator. When the Terminator Echo.
Yes.
When he's gonna say something, and he gets an option of multiple responses that flash up in his LED heads up display.
HUD.
Yeah. What is it? Yeah. His heads up display is HUD. So I get that. Mm-hmm. When this guy says, "Why did you make that call?" I get because you're too slow to make a call, or you should have been quicker, or you didn't see what was happening, or because I'm detached and I see all those little arrogant responses popped up, and thankfully, I just jerked the collar on that, just the chain crack, and said, "Well, you're arrogant right now." Probably a little bit of that arrogant platoon commander that I had. I felt that little I felt his spirit in my brain. I smashed it with the good, with the humility. And I did respond saying, well, I wasn't sure. I didn't hear you making a call. So, I made one. And then he said, well, I didn't want to retreat from the target. I wanted to push through.
Yeah.
And then I realized that, number one, being a leader doesn't mean that you have to be making the call every single time. It doesn't mean that at all. In fact, being a good leader means you're supporting what the real leader, the overall leader is wanting to do. What's good for the team. That's what you're supposed to do. And it was a good ego check for me. It's not all about me. And so let's always take a step back and make sure, it's cool to detach and see what to do tactically. How about, Jocko, detach and see what's best for the team and see how you can support your leader and see how you can be a team player. So that was the next important sort of lesson that I learned that stuck with me. Because how many times throughout the rest of my career was it, hey, it's this guy's idea or that guy, or it's my idea or the other guy's idea? How many times did that play out? I cannot count the number of times your idea versus my idea. That happened an infinite number of times.
Yeah.
Your idea versus my idea. And learning that lesson of, what's the best idea? And what are we really trying to get done? And is the boss, whoever that boss is, because, man, it's so easy, especially when you're young and you want to do well, you want to perform, you want to be the guy, right? It's so easy that when the opportunity comes for you to be the guy, to just jump up and beat your chest and be the guy. And it feels good, that short-term gratification of like putting your chest out like, yeah, I made that call. And it's such a short-term gain and long-term strategic loss to do that. And that's what I learned when the time I made the call. And I actually shouldn't have. I actually should have kept the mouth shut. All right. So those are the first little sections about that. And then I get into the laws of combat and the principles of leadership, and pretty straightforward, like a review, cover, move, simple, prioritize, and execute, decentralized command. I'll tell you what, though, as I'm writing that down, it's interesting because now, we've traveled the world. We've taught these principles over and over again to people and teams and organizations of every imaginable kind, and these things apply.
The biggest question I get when we're working is, how do you apply? They understand what they mean, and you can say those words and they can define them and explain them. And the question people always have is, how do I apply this? And the stories of those three platoons, and then when you kind of basically you review extreme ownership and dichotomy, briefly, but you kind of just go through the review and where they came from, is really what sets the stage for where these fit and how to look for where they fit. I mean, even that story about the platoon commander of whether or not you should have made the call. I mean, there's the seeds of balance in there too. Is, hey, same situation, previous platoon. Actually, that platoon commander did the exact same thing, but for a totally different reason. Oh, my people are all different, and the way I treat this one guy and relate to this one guy doesn't work in every situation. And when you talk about that too, is when you look at other people's plans, because ego is always the biggest issue with every client we work with. It's always ego is at the top. And the question that you ask, how important is this plan to that other person? Because if that other person has to do this plan, the worst thing you can do is fight them on the plan, no matter whatever the quality of the plan is. And even having the humility of saying, hey, in this situation, it isn't even about what is the best plan. It's what's the best way to implement the plan. Because if I prove that I'm right and my plan is better, and this guy has to admit to me and acquiesce to me, okay, your plan is better, what is the likelihood that guy's going to be totally on board with supporting my plan? It's not going to happen.
What is the likelihood that person's looking for you to fall on your face?
Totally.
What's the likelihood they help you fall on your face?
Yeah, that they even by kind of like you said in that second platoon, maybe not sabotage, but by just doing nothing. Mm-hmm. When you actually what you need them is to do the exact opposite of that, which is totally be in the game. So even as you read those reviews, those first 3 to set the stage, and even the review of EO and Dichotomy, I don't care how many times you've read those books, read it in this context because it changes in your mind how they apply to the world that you care about, which is your world, which doesn't have to be the SEAL teams. It's not what this is about. That's just the backdrop. It's actually where it fits in whatever world that you're in.
Not to mention the future, by the way. Like, you know how if you have a better plan, they have a good plan, you have a level 10. Mm-hmm. This guy is a level 9. And he's like, no, this plan's good. And you're like, no, mine's so much better than yours. And boom, force them to do it, right?
Yeah.
And not only during that plan, they might not do their best, but in the future, you're like the guy who's like, oh, you just think your plan is better. Yeah. So even in the future, he might not have your back as much.
Yeah. Why are you even going to put forth that effort, Echo? Mm-hmm. If when you brought me a plan that was a level 9.
Yeah, good plan.
A good plan. And I was like, no, mine's a level 10. We're not using your plan. How much effort are you going to put in next time to come up with a good plan?
Yep.
I mean,
we'll just say potentially less. I'll tell you that.
And I mean, you want to talk about this is real world application? I mean, this is you and I work together. Mm-hmm. You know, you come up with plans for things.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. And unless the plan is egregious, I'm sitting back over here going, okay, that's the way you want to set the stuff up. Cool. Like, okay, sounds good. You want to show up at 9:59 for a 10 o'clock? For a 10 o'clock, scenario.
Right.
But even with that, if it's you and me, I go, hey, 10 o'clock, 9:59, all good. If it's you, me, and let's say we're having a guest on, and I'll be, hey, man, guest. And I know you know what that means. That means, like, hey, that means you're not letting me down. It means we're looking bad. Right, we don't look bad, Mm-hmm. So, all good.
Yep.
But I'm not saying, hey, there's a guest, you better be here by 9:30 all set up. I just tell you what's up. Yep. And you know what to do.
Yep. It's true.
Communication.
Yes.
Understanding the intent.
Yep.
Dave Berke maybe doesn't fully qualify as a full guest anymore in your mind.
He's like a hybrid, guest friend.
He was not quite enough to get here at 9:30, but a solid 9:50.
Well, let's face it, I was here at 9:59, but you do. The point remains, yes, 100%.
Yeah, check. I mean, this is and same with like at Echelon Front. We're doing all kinds of things at Echelon Front. All kinds of things. I actually talked about this in the muster in Australia. It's really the most I've talked, really, I mean, not a ton, but several times I used in as example that at, the Echelon Front muster, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things happening. There's audio, visual stuff happening. There's kits being made to hand out to people. There's PT going on. There's so much. There's registration happening. There's check-in. There's handout of stuff. There's organizing of table. There's all this. There's just huge logistical things that are happening. How much do I know of what's going on? Next to none. And Jamie, who runs the muster, like she knows what the intent is. And if she feels like there's a little, I'm not 100% on this one. I'm not sure. She'll be like, hey, Jocko, should we do this or this? And I'll be like, well, what do you think? And she says, well, I think it'd be smoothest like this. Cool. Makes sense. But as far as me actually directing anything, it's very, very seldom am I saying, no, we need to do it this way. Occasionally we will. Occasionally I will. Occasionally I'll say, nope, that's not a good plan. And we're not going to do it that way. And as you see, when I say that, people go, cool. Yeah. Very seldom does someone want to get in a debate with me about something that I'm firm on. I'm firm so seldom.
That's because you hardly ever do it.
Yeah. I'm firm so seldom that when I am, people go, there's something that we're not seeing here. Right. So yeah, it's the going back to this, the just review of extreme ownership, the review of the dichotomy of leadership. Important because just like when you read the manual about machine gunning, cool, it talks about the purpose of the machine gun. right? And that's why I specifically read those 2 sections from the Marine Corps. One of them is, this is the purpose of the machine gun. This is the principle of what a machine gun does. The next one is how you actually do that.
That's how it applies, yeah.
And this is how you shoot that weapon from a bipod. Here's where you put the shoulder. Here's where you put the weapon on your shoulder. You apply pressure. That's what I'm talking about here. So we got the principles, and I have to cover them here. But then, how do we get into, actually shooting that weapon from the bipod? How do we actually fire these principles? How do we execute them? All right, next section. And again, I know we didn't coordinate about which sections to talk about, and there's a ton of sections. I just kind of was going through, going, all right, this one will be good. But skipping here, this one is called the power of relationships. The power of relationships, and this is one of those things you hear all the time, right? Relationships are important. Let me tell you how important they are. 99.9% of the things that I did in my entire military career were based on relationships and not based on chain of command. 99.9%. I can't remember what the other 0.1% is. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. But 99.9% of the things that I did in my military career were based on relationships. So that goes when I'm talking about being the commander of Task Unit Bruiser, and we have an operation, and Leif is going to be the assault force commander or the ground force commander on an operation. I'm not saying, hey, Leif, here's how you're going to do it. I'm saying, hey, Leif, here's what we got. What do you think? And we together have a relationship where we formulate a plan, or he formulates a plan and comes to me and says, hey, this is what I want to do. And I go, yeah, it looks good. Right down to when my boss would say, hey, Jocko, here's what I want you to do. I'd say, okay, boss, let me interpret that. Does this make sense? Is this what you really want? Can I turn this on this direction and move a little bit more in the opposite way so I can achieve this result instead? All that is based on relationships. So developing these relationships is the most important thing. 99.9% of what you do should be from the relationships you have. Going back to the book, there is another key element to leading any exceptional team: relationships. Leadership requires relationships. Good relationships with people above you, below you, and beside you in the chain of command are critical for a strong team. The better the relationships, the more open and effective communication there is. The more communication there is, the stronger the team will be. For example, there are times when a boss is driving forward on a less than ideal path that needs to be redirected. If you have a good relationship with the boss, you can explain tactfully what you see to be errors in their thoughts and ideas. As always, the approach you use to discuss this is important. Put the onus on yourself as to why the idea doesn't make sense. For example, boss, I really want to support the plan to the best of my ability, but I'm having a hard time understanding how to execute this part of it. Can you explain why you want it done that way so I can get it right? So that right there is how you shoot the weapon from a bipod, right? That is it. Now the conversation is open, and you can begin to figure out why the boss's idea is what it is and what you can do to influence that idea. But before even getting to that point, ask yourself some simple questions. First, how much will be gained by approaching the boss and trying to convince them to change their plan? If the difference is minimal, it's probably not worth investing any time or effort into it. Next, ask yourself how much of your concern is just your ego. There is a chance that you see it your way of doing things. There is a chance that you see your way of doing something as smarter or more efficient than what the boss has offered. If that is the case and you don't truly think there is much to be gained by using your method, let it go. Don't create drama over your ego. Lastly, ask yourself if you will be moving your relationship with your boss forward or backward by raising this issue. Man, I've been hammering that. Like at the muster, I've been saying, hey, every conversation I'm going to have with another person is to improve the relationship. That's like priority number one. Prioritize next year. Priority number one, I'm going to improve our relationship. If I'm going to have a conversation with Dave, our relationship is getting better. Dave's walking away from the conversation going, man, I hope I can do good by Jocko. As opposed to walking away, shaking his head going, I hope that guy forgot to take out his garbage Monday morning and he has to wait another week. Like just small curses you can put on me. right? You ever had that happen, Echo Charles?
Yes, sir. I have. That's why it's so funny.
Yeah, I know.
It's kind of annoying. You know.
Very annoying. It's not like a life-threatening thing, but
Right.
we don't like it. And so Dave walks away from the conversation. He doesn't want to kill me,
Right.
but he doesn't want me to have clean garbage cans either. So when I have a conversation, I'm looking to improve the situation.
Dude, we talk about leadership capital. Flynn Cochran and I are working together all the time. We're at the point now that we talk about that concept of leadership capital, not in sort of a theoretical sense. We, at the beginning of our training, when we start to work with companies that we're going to do for years, the very first thing we start with after setting the table of all these concepts is leadership capital. And the question you ask yourself every single time is, what I'm going to do a deposit or is it a withdrawal? And when people think in those terms, this book is called Leadership Strategy and Tactics. Are you thinking strategically in this, even in this conversation that we're having? And you know, the idea of what is the likelihood this is going to advance my relationship? The answer is 99.9% of the time going to be super obvious. It's going to stare you in the face. And if you think strategically, you will almost never make a leadership withdrawal. You'll almost never have any capital you're taking out of the bank. And then when you said don't create drama over your ego, and when your ego gets in the way, almost every single time, even when you get what you want, you are taking money out of the bank. You're depleting your leadership capital until eventually you have none and nobody wants you to win.
It's amazing that it's so obvious. Like, this is so obvious.
Yeah.
And yet people absolutely make that mistake time and time again. The other thing about this that's interesting, or if you want to take another perspective of it, is if my goal in going into a conversation is to improve my relationship with you, does that make me some kind of a fake person, right? Oh, I'm a fake person because I'm just trying to trick Dave into liking me. It's like, no, actually, I want us to win.
Yeah.
And by the way, this goes back to the difference between leadership and manipulation, which I talk about in this book.
Yeah.
So if my goal is to get you to do something that's going to benefit me, yeah, that's manipulation, and it's wrong. If my goal in improving our relationship is so that our team can do better, we can accomplish our mission, and both those things, by the way, benefit you, well, guess what that's called? It's called leadership.
So, with that, how, because some people on the flip side of that whole spectrum is like, they'll do that, but it's almost like, and I guess it's a question for you. So, okay, you ever watch Coming to America? Remember that show? Eddie Murphy. So it was where Eddie Murphy's African guy comes in.
And they're like princes or something in Africa. Yeah, I remember.
So he comes in.
Arsenio Hall was also in that,
yes,
correct?
Yeah,
right?
He was in there a bunch. Yes, sir. So anyways, so someone tells him that he's like, hey, you got to get in good with the dad. That's how you do it. So he's like, okay, he's going to build this relationship, apparently. He goes in and it's like weird, So essentially the point is he forced it. He tried to force it, so it didn't work. So in real life, how that looks is like, you ever get like, I don't know, your friend's like a real estate agent or something, and he's sending you like handwritten notes like, hey, just wondering how you're doing. You're like, bro, I don't even know you that good. It's like, it's real obvious they try to force a good relationship, and it almost makes you kind of suspicious. I mean, nowadays it does. For sure. So it's almost like.
It's called a brown noser. And people can, if you're a brown noser, that's a good point. Yeah, right? But there's a dichotomy with everything. If you go so far that all I'm looking to do is please Dave with this conversation, there's no tension at all, and there's nothing, just me being a pushover. Well, guess what happens with his respect for me? Its respect goes down a little bit. So I'm not talking about you gotta be just a brown noser at all.
Yeah. No. And then that's true too. But there's and the one I was thinking about, or the type of person I'm thinking about, is like, you can tell that this person, you're just trying to build a relationship for me or with me. I don't know why. I can suspect why. Maybe you want my business, or maybe you want something. I know, and that's kind of at the forefront.
So I mentioned this later in the book. You know how you just crush that? I'll tell you how you crush it. When I'm talking to Dave, you know why I'm talking to Dave, and you know why I want to build a relationship? Because I care about Dave. Yeah. The number one thing for when I'm talking to Dave, Dave knows that, you know what, I care about Dave. If that's the underlying principle on which I'm doing this is because I care about him, he's gonna know that subconsciously, right? Subconsciously, and maybe sometimes you got to be a little bit more proactive and make sure that someone understands it. Like, I mean, And it doesn't mean proactive by saying, hey, Dave, I really care about you. That doesn't work. You can't just say it. Yeah. You got to prove by your actions. You got to show people like, hey, guess what's more important than me? You.
Yeah.
So when I'm talking to you and I'm listening to you and I'm taking your advice on board and I'm saying, yeah, you know what? Let's go with your plan. I'm doing that because I want you to execute your plan. I want you to learn from your plan. I want to support your plan because I care about you.
Yeah, that makes actually that's good right there. That makes sense now. So it's almost like, actually it is, where if I want to build a relationship with Dave, I'm not going to think, okay, let me actively build a relationship just out of the blue or out of nothing. It's like, it's more like that's almost in a way secondary. Well, the primary thing is like, do I need to talk to Dave? Then yeah, I'll talk to Dave. But while I do that, the point is to build a relationship with him. I'm not going to be like, I need to build a relationship with Dave. Where's Dave? Let me call him up and start trying to build a relationship with him. See what I'm saying?
So you're right, and there's a danger here that someone's going to be encouraged to force their impose good relationships on people, right? Yeah. So that you got to be careful of that. And again. And actually, here's the next line in this book. You are not building the relationship so you can garner favor from the boss. No, you are trying to build a relationship so the boss trusts you and will listen to you so you and the team can more effectively accomplish the mission.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You want to accomplish the mission, which is good for everybody. And then it goes back and says, for these reasons, choose your battle carefully. Because if you remember, this whole paragraph is about, like, when do you actually approach the boss? When is it worth saying to the boss, hey, boss, can you explain this to me? Because I'm not sure that I understand what you want to have happen here. If it's not worth that conversation, because it's not going to be that big of a difference, just go with it. Just go with it.
But what I'm saying is, like, I could see someone maybe reading this. I could see me reading, let's face it. I could see me reading that and go into, like, let's say I had a job. And I could read that and I'd be like, hey, let me build a relationship with Jocko. And then I'll just roll in kind of out of the blue and be like, hey, because I'm building my relationship so I can garner trust. That's what I'm doing right now. So this is what I'm going to do. Hey, Jocko, did you catch that football game last night? And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, you're acting weird.
Here's the deal. If the premise that you go in on is you want to build a relationship with me for your own benefit, I'm going to see right through that, and so is anybody else. If the premise that you go in is because you care about me and you're wondering if I saw the football game because you know I like football and you want to talk to me about it and you care about me, that's going to shine through. And I'm not going to think this other negative thing. So yes, if you're a person that's walking around and you're going to use the principles in this book to benefit yourself, everyone's going to see through it. It doesn't work. And what's really cool, and this is all the closing of the book is what we're getting to right now, is if you want to have a successful run as a leader and you want to rise to the top, the best possible way to do that is to care about your team, care about the mission, take care of them, and that will show through, and eventually you will get to the top. If you're sitting there thinking, hey, I want to get to the top, so I'm ready to do whatever it takes and step on people or use people, it's so obvious. It's so obvious when someone's playing that game, and you can barely even fake it. Like, well, I'm going to get to the top, but I know I have to be cool with Dave, my boss. So I'm going to manipulate here. And here's the really sad thing. If you're that person, you think no one can see it.
Right.
Everyone can see it.
That was kind of the point there where, like, you got to be careful with that kind of stuff where, like, if I'm trying to build a relationship, like, bro, they can see what you're doing, like, because again, this is part
you got to be careful with it. Here's how you be careful with it. If you're trying to do this for yourself, it's not going to work. If you're trying to do this because you care about the team, it's going to work. And you're going to win. You personally are going to win if you do this. If you do this because you want to win, you're going to lose. If you do this because you want to take care of those people and you want the team to win and you want them to accomplish the mission so that they can elevate, it will work.
Yeah, that's true, huh? If I want to win.
If you're a young leader right now listening to this conversation and thinking about how you can build a relationship and the power of the relationship with your people, actually how you interact with that individual person isn't the biggest thing, because what those people on your team are doing is watching you. So maybe Jocko comes down and wants to build a relationship with me and, okay, I'm trying to figure out, is he authentic or genuine? What I actually get to do is watch Jocko with the other 10 dudes on the team. And over time, if Jocko is just how he is and he believes in that and that actually he's going to treat everybody the same way.
Yeah,
and it's not going to be what he does or says to me that gets me to buy off that he's on board with this. As I'm going to see him in all the other, in everything else that he does. I'm going to come to the conclusion like, dude, this is legit. That guy cares about everybody else being successful. Yeah. And then those look, your people are going to need you at times. And you will have opportunities to build relationships, but the authenticity isn't just what do I say to Echo to get Echo to like me or curry favor with Echo. Because actually what you're doing to your leader is you're watching everything they're doing. And the reason being fake about it doesn't work isn't because I just see it with me, is I see you do it with everybody else. That's why it's so obvious, because you're out there trying to figure out how to play the game with all these 10 different people. And if you're faking it, it's gonna be completely obvious. Not because of how you and I interact. So the thing that actually has to start with, if you've now put in charge of a team or a leader, go back and read that 2nd Platoon commander from Jocko's 2nd Platoon. He didn't walk in and go, I'm honored to lead you, to count you as people that work for me on my team. He just said, I'm happy to be a part of this, and I'm happy to help make this team win. That's it. You don't need to elevate the stature. Everybody knows who the boss is. The chain of command is understood. Everybody's got that hierarchy. Mm-hmm. What you actually need to do is look for ways to break down those barriers and just have them recognize all this guy cares about is us winning. That's all he cares about. And by behavior after behavior after behavior, eventually you're either doing it or you're not. And if you're doing it, people are going to get on board. If you're not, you're going to fail no matter what you do. And people are going to see that a mile away.
Oh, yeah. They smell it on you.
Mm-hmm. This continues on. It is obvious that building a trustworthy relationship with your superiors is important. But how do you do that? One of the simplest ways is obvious but often gets overlooked. That is performance. Your boss expects you to complete certain tasks, so complete them. Do them on time, on budget, and with as little drama as possible. Get the mission done. This includes doing things you might not be 100% in agreement with. I did this throughout my career, and it always served me well. Boss wants me to fill out some extra paperwork? Cool, I'll do it. Boss needs me to cover a shift for someone else on the team? I've got it. Boss needs me to help clean up some administrative mess that got spilled? I'm on it. Boss has a nasty, low-reward mission that needs executing? I'm all over it. With each one of those problems, I am the solution. With each problem I solve, the level of trust with the boss goes up. And I will continue on that path. I won't complain or try and shift bad jobs onto someone else or even look for some kind of praise. I will simply put my head down and do the work. Over time, my boss will know that I am the person who can make things happen. And more important, I gain clout with the boss. This is the opposite of the subordinate who complains and objects or always thinks he has a better way to do things. He loses influence with the boss every time he opens his mouth. Any objection from that subordinate is seen by the boss as another typical excuse. The more you talk, the less people listen. On the other hand, when I do what needs to be done, the boss trusts that I can make things happen. The boss also knows that if I do raise an objection, it is likely to be founded on solid facts that should be considered. Since I get things done and don't constantly voice my objections, the boss actually listens. I always utilize this strategy with my senior leadership, and it worked well. I would simply make things happen as often as I could. Now, here's where this is I'm gonna preemptively shut down your next comment, Echo Charles.
Okay.
Because I know I can already see from this conversation where your head's at. Yep. So listen to this. And this is where I kind of feel like I make my money.
Sure.
Right here.
Lay it on.
This is next level, okay? But how does that appear from the perspectives of your subordinates? Right? Because now everyone's looking at you going, you just do whatever the boss says. For instance, if I recognize that there are some flaws in my boss's plan, then my subordinates certainly recognize the same thing. What do I tell them? How do I preserve their respect if they think I can't see the errors the boss is making? The answer is simple. I tell them the truth. I say, hey team, I know there might be some better ways to skin this cat, but at this point, the effort to change the plan would take almost the same effort that it will to just get this job done. So we are just going to do it. And let me tell you what else we're doing by getting this done. We are building trust with the boss. Every one of these little tasks from him that we crush allows him to trust us more and more. And that gives us the ability to get listened to. So when something comes up that really doesn't make sense, he will listen. That is why we are going to execute this plan to the absolute best of our ability. There you go, Exo Charles. Your next question just got preemptively answered.
No more questions.
You're welcome. That's the part. See, that's the part where people get worried, and that's the answer.
Yeah.
People get worried. What are the guys going to think of me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And especially when you say, like, we're going to build trust with the boss, it's like, man, that's like, bro, I have no argument to that. Like, when I'm saying, I don't want to build trust with the boss, unless you're just some, like, anti-team member, and no one's that really. And, well, we don't want to be that. But, yeah, that's, it's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. I skipped to this section now called Play the Game. You have to play the game. To be more specific, you have to play the long game.
Yes, sir.
No one wants to hear this, especially from me. People don't want to hear about building relationships. They want me to say, you achieve victory through blunt force trauma. If someone gets in your way, go through them. Any political situation that is not turning out how you wanted it can be solved with a battle axe. And this was a little thing that was a problem in the teams for me. So if somebody knew me from like the periphery, from like the outside looking in, kind of saw Tasking a Bruiser or saw my platoon or saw me at Trade-At, they would kind of get this idea like, oh, okay, that's how Jocko cut rolls. And sometimes those guys would never get to see the rest of the picture, which would not work out well. And this is something that Leif talked about. Leif would see guys that he'd go, yeah, they're trying to get their Jocko on, and they understand the front-facing Jocko, right? The front-facing Jocko. They don't understand the backside and what's going on behind, in the rear-facing. That type of hyper-aggressive, take-no-prisoners mentality is certainly simple and straightforward, which is often the kind of leadership advice that people expect from me and what they want to hear. Because that attitude is so simple and straightforward, it hardly seems it could fail. And often that attitude doesn't fail. At least not at first. A heavy-handed and hostile approach usually works for a little while. You may be able to bludgeon people into doing what you want them to do for a day or two, maybe a week, maybe even a solid few months. Perhaps you can force a couple projects to completion through ruthless and aggressive offense. But those successes will be short-lived. As you trash relationships, burn bridges, and leave scorched earth in your wake, you will soon look up and realize you are done. You have destroyed everything for short-term gain. You have nothing left.
That last part is so important. The chain of command actually works, and you can utilize the chain of command all you want, and you can get things done. I can just force the outcome. I can. If I am in charge of you by rank or position or title, I can force that. The lesson that needs to take away, that will work until it doesn't. And then the results are catastrophic. They're not like, a little setback, or maybe I got to come up another way. When you go down that path, when you finally hit the end, and you will, maybe 6 months, maybe a couple of years. Some guys get by for a while. They do. They get by longer than we want them to. But when you get to the end and it stops working, then you're in catastrophe. Then it's complete disaster, and there's no recovery from that. So if you're going down that road, there is no easy end to that. As opposed to, hey, I work through relationship and maybe I hit a brick wall and things don't work out. I got to take a little bit of step back and things don't work out. The other approach, that frontal assault approach, when it ends, and I saw it throughout my career, I watched guys hit their limit. Some guys would be in a matter of weeks in their first new position, leading enlisted Marines for the first time. Sometimes it happened to guys when they were squadron commanders. I mean, they made it a long way, longer than they should have.
Yeah.
But eventually, they hit the wall.
Well, there's a reason for that, and that's as soon as you were talking about this, I was thinking in the military. As I said earlier, you get that job for long enough to just barely start to learn it, and then you're on to another job.
Yeah.
So what happens is it happens a lot in the military. Too often, a guy's just a guy that leads by blunt force trauma, and he gets done with his.
You talk about it in the book. There's like rest of the guys in the squadron are willing to just take the abuse. I don't care if my boss is a jerk. I'm actually going to be successful anyway. And you got a bunch of core guys in the squadron that have no problem enduring that.
Yep.
This guy sucks, but I don't care because I want to win. We're going to be successful. And they actually benefit from that.
And he's gone in 24 months.
Right.
So this is what happens, and we see this as well. You have a person that was in the military that rose through the ranks and did a good job on paper, but was abusive and blunt force trauma and beat down people on his rise up, retires from the military, gets out of the military, and then all of a sudden gets a job in a civilian sector and doesn't last. Because as soon as he tries that, people are going, wait a second, oh, you think you're going to be here for the next 10 years? I'm not putting up with this. No one in the chain of command is putting up with this. And then you know what they say? Well, when I was in the military, it was so much easier. The people are better. They have a million little excuses that they tie into it. Everyone's got this common goal. Everyone's already been screened. They got that million little things. They respect the chain of command. It's like, no, actually, you're a bad leader. You're a bad leader. Being in the military and even getting promoted through the military does not by any stretch mean that you're a good leader at all.
No guarantee.
And this is the type of person who gets done with a platoon. They get a good fit rep. This is another scary thing about this is sometimes up the chain of command, these people look great. From the people that are above them, their boss loves them. Their boss is like, hey, he got everything done. He was aggressive. Really liked him. You go into that platoon and you realize, or go into that unit, and everyone goes, oh, we hate that guy. Yeah. But we're going to endure him. Right. And we are going to endure him. He's only going to be here for 18 months or 24 months. And by the way, we still care about our job and we still have pride in our unit. So we're going to make him look as good as we can, but we hate him.
Yeah.
But we know we can outlast him.
Yeah, we're over here playing the long game. Yeah. Don't care. I hate him, fine, I'll hate him. But what I actually really want is in the long run, all my Marines or all the people on my team, I want them to be successful. So I'll play that game. Yep. And you know what? If he gets promoted, looks good, the only thing that will stop me from playing the game working for a boss that I hate, and bro, I have worked for bosses that I hate. The only thing that's going to stop me from doing that.
Me too, by the way.
Yeah. The only thing that stops me from doing it is my own ego. That's the only thing that keeps me going, you know what, this guy sucks, and you know what, I'm putting a stop to it right now. Yep. The only thing that forces me down that road is my own ego. Just keep it in check. You are playing the long game, and you might not get that satisfaction of seeing him fall. You might not get that. But if you are playing the long game so you and your people are successful, it won't matter. It won't matter. And it may take longer than you want, but it will not matter in the end. If you are indeed playing the strategic game.
And so there's someone that's listening right now going, well, I'm going to let my boss abuse my people. It's like, no, actually not at all. However, and there's whole sections in this book that cover this. Oh, if I got someone that's abusing my people or is doing something unethical, unsafe, maybe it is time for a mutiny. But, and we'll get into that, how you make that decision of when it's time to actually draw a line in the sand. We'll talk about that. Going back to this section is, talking about the person that just uses blunt force trauma. And I say, don't do that. Instead, you have to play the game. That means I try to support my boss and perform my duties to the best of my ability. In playing the game, I'm building up trust with the boss. I'm building a relationship. Why is it so important to build a relationship with my boss? Is it so I can get promoted? Is it so I can get assigned easier tasks? No, I am trying to build the relationship, not for my own personal gain. I'm trying to build a relationship with my boss so we can better accomplish the mission. And playing the game doesn't only go up the chain of command. It goes down the chain of command too. When you are the boss and your subordinates come to you objecting to something you say, listen and ask for alternatives. And when they give you a decent one, say yes and utilize their alternative. Even if their alternative doesn't seem quite as effective or efficient as your methodology, let them do it. This builds trust and relationship with the people below you in the chain of command. As often as you can, listen and say yes. That's a nugget of beautiful advice. Dude, that so many people don't follow. Yeah. As often as you can, listen to your people and say yes to what they are saying to you. As often as you can. That's how you empower people.
Yeah.
That's how you build trust with them. That's how you build a relationship with them.
There are no 10 out of 10 plans. They don't exist. Dave Berke, at the height of his career at Top Gun, never had a perfect plan. There is no such thing as a perfect plan. And your idea is not perfect, no matter how experienced you are and how smart you are. Now, their plan might be an 8 and yours might be a 9.9. But the deciding factor isn't the quality of the plan. The deciding factor is the person's willingness to be successful when that plan has a problem. So if somebody has a plan that's just barely good enough, but they really want to do it, say yes. Because what they're going to do is they're going to hit a wall, and they're going to try to find a way to get over or around or through that wall. That's what they're going to do. Your plans are not perfect. Neither are theirs. So just go with their plan as often as you can.
Continuing on, eventually when a subordinate from the team comes to you with an idea that doesn't make sense, you can say no and they won't begrudge you for it. You simply explain the issues with their idea and why you aren't going to do it that way, and they will be okay with it. They will accept your direction without feeling that you don't listen, and they will move forward with full commitment to accomplish the mission. I was getting there, but this is the little section on when is mutiny in order. And we just touched on this, and I give some good background on it, and then I say, as we try and work to get our boss to support what we're saying, right? We make that effort, and I explain how to do that. And then we get to a point where I say, okay, but even that doesn't always work. Sometimes a boss digs in and will not change their mind. Is it time for a mutiny? Is it time to draw a line in the sand? You could tell your boss, absolutely not, I will not do this your way. It might be time to say that, but it also might not be. There are many variables to assess. And I talk about some of those variables, but then I'm going to jump to here. Here are some possible outcomes when the subordinate refuses to comply. So this is when you decide, you know what, my boss came up with this plan, or my boss wants to do something and I will not do it. Here's some things that can happen. 1, the leader recognizes that the subordinate is extremely concerned about the plan, so concerned they are putting their career at stake and risking possible punitive actions because the plan is actually really bad. This is the best possible outcome. The leader, awakened by the refusal of his or her subordinate to execute a plan, reconsiders the options and decides to execute a different way. Now the subordinate should rejoin the team, throw their support behind the new plan, and go help the team execute. So there's like the flowery outcome. You know, Dave orders me to do something. I say, Dave, I refuse to do this. This is an unsound plan and I will not execute. And Dave goes, wow, this must be a bad plan. Let me reassess. Okay, Jocko, explain it to me one more time. Okay, let's come up with a new plan. And then I say, thanks, Dave, and we're good. That's the best case scenario.
Sure.
Here's a possibility number 2. The leader digs in even deeper and will not change the plan. Since the subordinate has refused to participate, the leader fires that subordinate and puts a new leader in place who has been handpicked for unquestioning obedience. For the boss, the problem is solved. But the team will absolutely suffer since now the voice of reason has been replaced by one of the boss's yes men. It will be the boss's plan, and that is it. No one will have any choice or control. This is a horrible situation. To avoid it, consider the fact that since the boss is refusing to listen to suggestions about the plan, it is probable that the boss has a big ego and is likely to put a yes man in to execute his or her vision without resistance. If this is a possible outcome, it must be weighed carefully. So when you're dealing with someone that's like, I'm not listening to your plan, as soon as you draw the line, they're not like, oh, well, chances are they're not now all of a sudden ready to shift their mindset.
And what are the attributes of a leader that comes up with a plan that's utterly catastrophic without vetting it through anybody and tells everybody this is the plan? Yeah. Super humble, team player that's on board for the big win. And is that the type of leader you're dealing with here?
Yeah. It's bad. Continuing on, if a subordinate draws a line in the sand and refuses to execute a plan or outright quits the position as protest, they instantly remove all influence of any kind over the boss. So while the subordinate has made a very loud and clear statement, once that statement has been made, there's nothing else they can do. They are no longer a factor in the outcome. And that's one of the questions I have about David Hackworth's decision to be interviewed and state in an interview that if we didn't change the way we were fighting the war in Vietnam, we were going to lose. When he did that, when he kind of drew a line in the sand, he was out of the Army very quickly and out of command, and that was that, which means he lost influence. And let's face it, he would have been a general. Who knows how high he would have gone, but he would have been a division commander, eventually. And then maybe he could have influenced and moved the war in the right direction. But instead, he drew a line in the sand and he lost all of his influence. So now let's put ourselves in David Hackworth's shoes, right? We love soldiers. We love the Army. We love our men, and our men, we see men in the Army, in the Marine Corps throughout, grunts being killed in Vietnam, and it breaks your heart every single time. And then he gets control of his own battalion, and he starts to save their lives, and they start to win. But no one else is doing it. And with his heart being broken over and over again, he can't take it anymore and says, you know what? I'm drawing a line in the sand. Can I see how that could happen? Oh, absolutely. So this is one of the things that you have to weigh and think about as a leader. The last one, if the subordinate tries every possible method to convince the boss that the plan is wrong and sees no way of changing the boss's mind, then perhaps the better option is for the subordinate to make one last statement of concern and then proceed to lead the team in the execution of the plan to the best of their ability. This way, the subordinate leader can at least do their utmost to mitigate the negative impacts of the poor plan, note the harmful results so they can be explained clearly to the boss, and continue to play the long game in building a relationship with the boss so they can convince the boss there is a better way to execute going forward. The inherent risk is in this, of course, is that, as Napoleon said, the subordinate is still culpable for the outcome. This is Band of Brothers, Dick Winters. They get ordered to do a recon. The war is all but over. They get ordered to do a recon across the river. They go do the recon across the river. They have a guy get wounded. They have a guy get killed. They come back. The next night, his boss says, do another recon. And he says, boss, not a good idea. We didn't learn anything last night. However, we did lose a guy and another guy wounded, and it could be even worse. I recommend we don't do it. Nope, do the recon. Boss, not a good plan. Do the recon. And what does Dick Winters do? Dick Winters says, got it, boss. Cool. Tells his guys, all right, we're doing a recon tonight of this basement over in this building, and bring some wine. So that's a classic example. Was that the right thing to do? Yes. Yes. Now, if he would have quit and said, no, I refuse to do this, that lieutenant colonel would have said, cool. Okay, later, Dick Winters. Yep. I got this next guy. He'll take a recon over there tonight. Doesn't matter. Yep. So sometimes, and I heard this about SEAL platoons in Vietnam as well, getting tasked with doing a patrol or an ambush in an area that was really bad, that they didn't feel like was going to be a fruitful ambush, and get ordered to do it. And they're like, hey, roger that, boss. Cool. Patrol out the gate, go 200 meters into the jungle, set up a perimeter, sit there for 6 hours, come back, say, yep, we didn't see anything. So, is that ideal? No. But what are you going to do? These are the things you have to consider as a leader.
I had it in the military all the time, happens now all the time, is people, there's that phrase, falling on your sword. And I think most people understand that. I don't think it's just military. It's just the idea of, when are you going to hold your ground, and when are you going to be willing to fall on your sword for whatever this idea, this position that you think you have. And what you have to recognize, I think, is two things, is when you do that, it's catastrophic for you. That's what the saying means. It's catastrophic for you. But the other part is that comment that Napoleon comment was, that's not a free pass for you. Mm-hmm. The outcome is still yours, and it won't make you feel better, and it won't give you a sense of accomplishment if you fall on your sword and your team still ends up losing or something catastrophic happens, just to say, well, I held my ground and I told the boss we're not doing it. And you get removed, you get countermanded, or worse, you get fired or something. Really, the outcome is still yours. And again, the piece that drives people more often to do that is your ego, convincing yourself that what I'm being asked to do is catastrophic. There are times that's actually true. Sometimes you get orders that are wrong. They will be catastrophic. And that story, the Dick Winter story there, but when they lost that guy, the real question was, this is a waste. This is a wasted life. This was something we shouldn't have done because it had no real benefit. That is catastrophic. But more often than not, when we get asked to do things that we think are wrong, if we can actually detach a little bit and think, okay, what is the worst outcome of this? Is it really catastrophic? Is it really worth falling on your sword? Or if you stay in position, can you exert enough control that you are the reason why it is not catastrophic? That you are the one that prevents the potential catastrophe from happening? And the answer to that is almost never. Is it actually almost never. And even if it is, the most influential thing you have to prevent the catastrophe is your leadership. And that's hard, I think, for a lot of people. It's like, because falling on your sword has this, it's like a cliche that people almost want to do.
Well, you get to be the martyr.
Yeah, you're the martyr. And
and also, how often are you failing as a leader to articulate the issues well enough with your boss that they actually understand? So instead of trying to formulate a better argument for your boss to understand what you're trying to say, you just say, well, he doesn't get it, I'm going to fall on my sword. I mean, how often, why is it so rare that it's catastrophic? Because how often is a boss getting told that there's going to be a catastrophic outcome? Hey, boss, I think if we open this building, if we get a lease on this building, we try and set up shop there, I think we're going to lose a lot of money and we're going to burn a bunch of our employees and it's going to be a complete and utter catastrophe. And the boss is like, hey, I still like it. Go. Right? Or in the military. Yeah. Hey, boss, I am very concerned that we are going to take heavy casualties and there will be no gain. And the boss goes, no, I like it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I've never even had a boss do anything even close to those things. Now, could it be, hey, I want you guys to approach the target from here? Well, boss, I don't agree with that. Well, I'm telling you to do it. Okay, well, how catastrophic is that? Yeah. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to get on site and I'm going to go, boss, hey, pass the pro word that avenue of approach was blocked and we're now approaching from where I planned to approach. But I wouldn't say that, but I'd say now we're going to have to approach from a different direction. Sorry.
Did you say pro word? Pass the pro word?
Pro word. Yeah, they're just words that they're like code words.
Code word,
yeah.
And and it's not like they're a secret, but you might want to tell the upper chain of command that we have passed through phase line red and we are now approaching the target building. And instead of saying all that, you just say, Chevrolet.
Oh,
and they go,
the
cool.
pro word.
Yep, they got the pro word.
Yeah. The reality is that first scenario with this boss wants the catastrophe. The reality is that it almost never happens.
It almost never.
And the likelihood that it's happening to you is almost zero. I'm not saying it's zero. It's not zero, but it
can happen.
It can happen.
It can happen. And in those cases, you may have to fall on your sword and say, I refuse to do this.
That's right. That second scenario happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. And actually, that's the one that you should be planning for, to how to manage that all the time, which is that, this is actually not a good plan. And you know what? I'm in the ideal position to mitigate all the risk associated with it, and I'm going to do exactly that. Hey, boss, we're going to accomplish that mission. Let's go make that happen. And then do, like you said, all those things. What you should be planning for is that second scenario, because that's going to happen throughout your career all the time. Scenario number one, almost never.
Yep. Don't think it ever happened to me. And I would say it's a pretty good statement because I think I would remember it if it did. I'm going to think about this, though. I'm going to think about if I ever got ordered to do something that I was in complete and utter disagreement with.
Especially something that's not in training. I've had some pretty bad training plans.
Yeah, but those are training.
But those are training plans. Yeah. So whatever. In my real combat situations, I would have to put some thought into even what I think even comes even close to that.
What even was close.
Yeah.
All right. Well. And I just took that thought one step further. Did I sometimes hear some crazy plans coming down the chain of command? Yeah. Yes. And then I would say, hey, boss, this is crazy for the following reason. The boss would say, oh, cool, thanks for pointing that out. Don't do it. Pretty straightforward. I didn't, boom. All right, skipping forward to another section here. The section is called subordinate your ego, which is a good phrase, powerful phrase. And I actually go through a pretty detailed example of when I had to subordinate my own ego and how that helped solve this certain problem. And I end up kind of going into an explanation of what the ego is, how it's playing out granularly. Here we go. Back to the book. Ego is like reactive armor. The harder you push against it, the more it pushes back. Do I get some good credit for that one?
Yeah.
That is
the tankers out there ought to appreciate
yes,
that.
that is exactly. So true.
Yes.
Someone that's got an ego, like you might not even notice it until you brush up against it. Then all of a sudden it reacts. Continues on. If I had confronted the CEO, and that goes back to the story, if I had confronted the CEO about his attitude and told him he had a big ego, he would have dug in even deeper. So I did the opposite. I disarmed his ego by subduing my own. Now, this is why I wanted to bring this up today. You might be afraid that if you subordinate your ego, you will get trampled. But that normally doesn't happen, because subordinating your ego is actually the ultimate form of self-confidence. And I think that line right there is one of the lines when I was writing this book, I just like took a screenshot of it and texted it to you, Dave. I was like, that line right there.
Yeah.
Because subordinating your ego is actually the ultimate form of self-confidence. That level of confidence earns respect. So while the initial thought or feeling might be that you back down, you've actually shown that you have the strength and confidence to give the other person credit, and they will recognize and respect that confidence either consciously or subconsciously. They feel it. They feel it. Echo Charles, when you're getting ready to roll jiu-jitsu and you have never rolled with this person before and you lock up with them, you know, right? You can feel it. Now,
Yes.
whether you want to admit it or not, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what this does. When someone says, hey, you know what? Go ahead and run with that. And Dave might think, well, that's right. I'm going to run with it because my plan was better. And in the back of his mind, he thinks, man. Yeah. Like when someone says, oh, you want to start a cross side? That's basically what you're saying. That's basically what you're saying.
Okay.
You want to start in a dominant position? Go ahead. It's fine. It's fine with me. I'm so confident in my jiu-jitsu that you can basically start anywhere. You can start in a totally dominant position and I'm going to be fine. When you subdue your ego, when you subordinate your ego, that person, you might be thinking, oh, I'm going to start on the mountain. I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
And you think that, right? And you feel powerful. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, ooh. Maybe subconsciously you're thinking, wow, this person is confident. This person knows that they're going to win.
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing that happens here. Hey, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and run with this? And you go, yeah, that's right, I won. And in the back of your mind, you think, man, Jocko doesn't even really, he doesn't even care where this ends up.
The word subordinate is such a good word, because when you tell people to check your ego, it's like, okay, I can check my ego. But if you're the type of person that reads the word subordinate and it bothers you, you are the person that's being spoken to right now. Because your ego says, I am not going to subordinate, because it's submissive or it has this feeling of, that's why that word is actually so good, because most of us don't want to do that.
No.
I don't like that word subordinate. I don't want to subordinate. I don't want to be submissive or passive. That word is awesome, because if you feel yourself right now reading that going, I don't like that, read this again and again, and because it's actually what you need to do.
And check this out. If you're reading this and you're going, I don't want to subordinate my ego because I'm powerful, then read the next part, which says, if you're truly powerful, you got no problem doing it.
This doesn't concern you at all.
Guess what? Hey, you know what? I don't need to be the star of the show, because I'm just going to be over here and it's going to be fine. You guys can you can pay attention to the other guys. That's cool. I'll be over here and I'm good with that. I don't need to say anything. I don't need to start in the best position. I'm good. I'm confident. I've been doing this game for a long time. We're good. It continues on. So after I say either they will recognize and respect that confidence either consciously or subconsciously, it says, and that is the truth. To put your ego in check, to subordinate your ego, you must have incredible confidence. If you find you cannot put your ego in check because you're afraid it might make you look weak, then guess what? You are weak. Don't be weak. Subordinate your ego, build relationships, and win the long game. That's a pretty important chapter in this book.
That's huge. I mean, that gets to the core of what infects almost everything we do. There almost isn't a problem in the world that exists in your life that isn't connected to your ego. And that is the lesson for that. And the amazing thing about that is that not only are you strong if you can do that, you just start winning everywhere. You just start winning everywhere in life. You just start winning when you do that. When you look around and go, oh, no factor, go for it, do that.
Yep.
You win. Life gets so much better when you're able to do that.
Just let it go. And the supreme confidence. This is the weird part. This is what people don't understand. The supreme confidence that exudes when you go, oh, you want to take lead on this? Cool, go for it. Cool.
Yeah. What can I do to help?
Yeah. What can I do to support you? Sounds like you got this handled. What can I do to help? The supreme confidence that exudes is powerful. Kind of like when someone gets in your head on the map, right?
Yeah.
When they go, cool, you can start wherever you want, bro.
I'll tell you an even more powerful moment. Smaller, it's seemingly smaller, but it's way more powerful when you think about it. So let's say me and you are rolling, right? And then you, let's say I get a good position on you, right? And you, and then we sort of drift. Let's say I get mount, whatever, great position on you, and we're scrambling, whatever. I still got mount, and then we kind of drift out of bounds, right? Or we run into somebody or whatever, where we got to kind of stand up, get out of the jiu-jitsu position, stand up and walk to a clear part on the mat. And then, because that'll happen sometimes, and the person in the bad position will just sort of clap your hand like you're starting all over.
Oh, yeah, that's even, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
For sure.
They'll be like, oh, yeah, we're
I was going to say
resetting.
maybe a small adjustment. Maybe we're going, you're mounted, but I got my elbow already in, so it's going to be okay.
But that's a little bit more sneaky.
Yeah.
It's probably just as sneaky, but just in a different way. It's a different thing in a little bit of way.
Well, they're both going to send the same message.
Yeah.
I'm scared.
But this, exactly right. So
I'm not confident.
Yeah, exactly right. So let's go one step further. So let's say we roll. I get into a good position on you. We go back to the center of the thing. You slap my hand and you get into the neutral position, right? And it's like a little dance. Someone's going to lead this and lead that, right? So you slap my hand, we get into a neutral position. The confident guy will just be like, cool, we're in a neutral position now. Cool. Yeah. And we just keep rolling.
Oh, yeah. The unconfident guy.
Wait, I had mount. No, let's go back to mount. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Even though he'd still be justified, but the supremely confident man, that's it, fly.
Oh, cool, yeah, you start to. I'll tell you what, why don't you mount me?
Don't say anything. Just be like, whatever. This is what we're doing. I don't need attention to let you know that's how supremely confident I am. You see what I'm saying? Like I'm so confident. I go ahead, mount. I'll let it slide. I don't have to say that. Just do it. Whatever.
Be that guy.
100%.
All right, moving on to this next section. Core tenets. The first one is called be capable and ask for help. A leader must know and understand the jobs, skills, and equipment used by the people below him or her in the chain of command. This isn't to say a leader needs to be an expert in everything. That is impossible. A platoon commander does not know as much about shooting as his snipers do. He can't understand the various radios as well as his radio man does. He will not know the details of routes to and from a target like the point man will. On a construction site, the foreman won't be able to operate the equipment with the same efficiency as those who operate that equipment all day long. He won't be able to lay block as well as the masons or tie rebar like an iron worker. In the manufacturing business, a plant manager might not be able to run each machine or handle every task on the line. But in these cases, the leader must at least be familiar with what goes on below him in the chain of command. What should a leader do if he doesn't know or understand a skill or job that plays a role in the accomplishment of the mission? Simple. Ask. That's right, go and ask. And not just for an explanation. Ask to learn and actually do. Sight in that sniper weapon. Program that radio. Lay some block. Run that piece of equipment for a little while. Get familiar and then actually practice the task. Unfortunately, most people avoid this process because they fear they will look stupid. They think their subordinates will lose respect for them. But the opposite is true. This is another area where ego can be a real impediment to success. Some leaders feel it is a weakness to ask for help. That couldn't be further from the truth. Subordinates will actually respect the leader more if they come and try to learn and perform the task. What subordinates don't respect is a leader who tries to appear to know everything. I know this from experience. When I was a junior ranking SEAL, I was always impressed by a boss who would come and truly show interest in what we were doing on the front lines. I was even more impressed if they asked questions and wanted to really understand my perspective. And I would be completely impressed if the leader physically tried to do what I was doing: program a radio, shoot an advanced weapon system, or build a demolition charge. If you need help with something, ask for it. Subordinates understand that their leaders might not know everything. Put your ego in check and ask for help. You will do a better job and you will gain respect from your team. Stepping down and learning frontline skills also shows your humility. It proves you aren't above what the frontline troops are doing, and it shows you know their job is hard. Seems like common sense.
It does seem like common sense, and I see that very rarely in certain leaders in the private sector. And I think it's exactly what you said. There's this fear of looking dumb. When I had my first real job in the Marine Corps, it was called Powerline. I had 38 Marines. It's a big position for a lieutenant. It's a young officer. I had 38 Marines, and their job was to essentially service the engines of the aircraft and make sure the jets were good to take off and land. It was a big, huge responsibility. And there was a qualification to get that. And when I took over that job, I got that qualification, which was not really what I was designed to do, but I wanted to do it to learn. So I learned all the things that I needed to know. And I got this designation, this qualification to be able to do this launch and recovery thing.
Is that normally an enlisted guy's job?
It is. Okay. It is an enlisted guy's job. But it was my first job. I wanted to know what they were doing. And guess what? We had 24 plane captains in the squadron. I was the worst one by far. I was terrible at it. And I didn't have a ton of experience and a ton of history. But not just what I learned from doing it, but the connection I made with those guys, that I was just willing to do that. And it isn't like some gesture of, hey, I want to spend it to actually learn what's going on in their world. It made me so much smarter because I understood what the problems that they were dealing with. Getting down with your folks, if you're going to do it just to kind of put on a good show and don't waste your time. But if you're actually willing to go down there and look stupid, their respect for you will go, because most people aren't willing to do it, it will go off the charts. And it seems so obvious, it's such common sense, and it's this actually easy thing to do.
It is counterintuitive. Even though it seems common sense from us looking at it right now, it's super counterintuitive because you think, well, I don't really know how to do the job, so I'm going to hide from it. So that way they won't know, and I won't look bad. Had to throw this in there. One of the most important tenets of leadership I adhere to as a leader is the idea of extreme ownership. The idea of extreme ownership has struck a chord with people, and it has been incredibly effective in helping those in all kinds of leadership positions, leading all kinds of teams in all kinds of industries, businesses, and professions. Leaders found that when they took ownership of everything in their world, they saw other members of their teams, both up and down the chain of command, taking ownership as well. When people take ownership of their jobs and their mission, the job gets done and the mission gets accomplished. When there are problems and people take ownership of those problems, the problems get solved. While extreme ownership might seem like a fairly simple concept to understand, it can be difficult to fully comprehend what it really means. What it really means is that the leader is responsible for everything, absolutely everything. This can be hard to fully understand because there are times when a subordinate does something that the boss feels they cannot control and cannot possibly be responsible for. A subordinate might make a mistake or take an action that is completely unexpected. How can that be the leader's fault? I like to use the example of a young machine gunner in a SEAL platoon to exemplify how a leader truly is responsible for everything that happens. A SEAL machine gunner plays a key role in a SEAL platoon. As the name implies, he carries a machine gun, a heavy belt-fed weapon capable of firing over 700 rounds per minute. The machine gun's ability to lay down such massive firepower makes it critical to a SEAL platoon or squad because it is the main weapon that puts down suppressive fire on the enemy. It keeps the enemy's heads down, allowing the rest of the SEALs to maneuver. The machine gun provides the main source of cover in the fundamental tactic of cover and move, the first law of combat. Of course, the machine gun doesn't operate itself. It's worthless without the machine gunner. The machine gunner carries the weapon and its ammunition, maintains the weapon, loads and fires the weapon. Those are the mechanics of the job, but a machine gunner must also be aware of how to best employ his weapon. He must understand how to get in good position, from which to best engage the enemy and provide cover for his team. He must also understand the terrain he is in and see how it can be used to his advantage and to the advantage of the platoon, and how the enemy can also use the terrain to their advantage if allowed to do so. The machine gunner must also understand his field of fire. Field of fire is the area of the battlefield a SEAL is responsible for, whether a street, hallway, valley, or cardinal direction. In that area, he must locate and engage the enemy. But field of fire is equally important in its limitations. Outside one's field of fire, there might be innocent civilians, other friendly forces, or perhaps even your own SEALs. Bluntly stated, staying within your field of fire prevents you from shooting your own people. So the machine gunner can have a lot on his mind. But because his job is to shoot, there generally isn't much leadership required from him. Machine gunners are almost always part of a small fire team of 4 to 6 people, which is led by a fire team leader. With the lack of leadership opportunities, being a machine gunner is a job that is generally held by relatively inexperienced new guys who are in their first or maybe second platoons. Because of the size of the machine gun, it is also often referred to as the pig, which makes the machine gunner a pig gunner. Also, because of the size of the pig gun, it usually requires a SEAL who is slightly larger to carry it. While it is not always true, it is common for new guys to be assigned as pig gunners if they are large-framed, strong individuals. There is also an ongoing stereotypical joke in the SEAL teams that pig gunners, being big, strong new guys, aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. Any new guy that does something dumb will be told he will make a good pig gunner. When a briefing is completed, it would not be uncommon for the platoon chief to ask, "Do you pig gunners understand?" This is why the stereotypical pig gunner makes the perfect example of extreme ownership, because the stereotypical pig gunner is going to make mistakes, and they are a very easy target for blame. I heard it on a fairly regular basis from young SEAL leaders on training operations that I ran. The young leaders didn't fully understand their roles and the concept of extreme ownership. The training operations I ran were very complex and stressful combat simulations. We had a large budget for training, and we utilized it to replicate the chaos and mayhem of combat to the best of our ability. We hired Hollywood set designers to make our training areas look like cities in Iraq or Afghanistan. We used role players to mimic the actions of both enemy combatants and friendly civilians. We simulated weapons with paintball or other high-end paint marking rounds, or with multi-million-dollar laser tags system. This simulated combat zone not only taught tactics, it was the ultimate leadership laboratory. And this is where I would see young SEAL leaders reveal that they didn't understand what extreme ownership really meant. Let's say a young pig gunner shot his weapon in the wrong direction outside his field of fire. When I would ask the pig gunner's leader what had gone wrong, it was very easy for him to say, "Well, the pig gunner made a mistake. He shot in the wrong direction." "Whose fault is that?" I would ask. "Well, the gunner aimed the weapon. He pulled the trigger. It is his fault," would be the reply. "Actually," I would explain, "it's your fault." "How can it be my fault? He's the one that shot the weapon," the young leader would object. This was a pretty common response, but it was wrong. You see, if the pig gunner makes a mistake, it means he hasn't been trained properly. The leader is responsible for training the gunner. If the gunner shoots in the wrong direction, it means he hadn't been briefed so he fully understands his field of fire. The leader is responsible for briefing the gunner. And yes, it could also mean the pig gunner is completely incompetent in understanding his task and knowing his field of fire. If that is the case, it is the leader's responsibility to identify that shortfall and either train the gunner so he does understand, remove the gunner from his position and place him into a job he is capable of, or as a last resort, fire the gunner from the team so if he cannot do his job properly. So regardless of the reason the gunner failed, it is the leader's fault. A leader is responsible for everything a person on his or her team does. I even felt like this when one of my guys would get in trouble off base. If one of the SEALs who worked for me went out in town and drank too much and got into a fight, I always thought, where did I mess up? How did I fail to make that individual realize the consequences of his actions? Why didn't I know he was headed for trouble and keep him from going out? Taking extreme ownership means that leaders are responsible for every action the people on their team make. It is as simple as that. You might wonder why I had to put that section in there, but we hear this all the time.
Yeah.
It's not really my fault. I mean, I get it. oh yeah, of course I'm responsible, but hey, the pit gunner he's not that good. Like, no. Hey, the marketing department, I know it's my responsibility. They released something that should have been released, but it's my fault, but I'm going to fire that person. Oh, okay. It's not my fault. It's their fault. It means everything. And then we get into this preemptive ownership. When a leader knows they cannot blame anyone or anything else, they will implement what I call preemptive ownership. They will take ownership of things to prevent problems from unfolding in the first place. The leader who knows he can't blame his machine gunner when the machine gunner makes a mistake is going to take preemptive ownership and focus on training that machine gunner and ensuring he understands the plan and his part in it. The leader who knows bad weather is no excuse not to execute a mission will take preemptive ownership to ensure there are layers of contingency plans in the event the weather takes a bad turn. The same is true for any team. If the leader knows there truly are no excuses, then he or she will make every conceivable effort to prepare. Ownership isn't just about taking responsibility when mistakes happen. The highest form of extreme ownership takes place preemptively before mistakes occur. So don't just take extreme ownership after the fact. Take preemptive ownership to mitigate problems before they even happen. Some people don't make that connection. Extreme ownership is not only in the past tense, it actually is the present tense and future tense.
Yeah, there's also a reason why this is in the strategy section of this, is that this is sort of the highest level of the mindset of, if you really believe everything is your fault, if you really believe that, not with a little caveat or like, well, in this case, if you can take the butt out of it and it's just my fault, period. If you actually have that frame of mind, genuinely, and you actually truly believe that, this idea of preemptive ownership is actually really easy. Because you just start to look for things well in advance of what pitfalls are going to come. And doing this isn't as hard as it might sound. The barrier isn't taking preemptive ownership. The barrier is actually believing that there are no little exceptions to where it's actually not your fault. Mm-hmm. That's the piece that's hard for folks. And it's hard everywhere. It's hard in the military. It's hard in the private sector. It's hard in families. But when you see the ones that do it, this thing that you just talked about, people are doing it all the time. The ones that truly are there, that's all they're doing is looking for those places ahead of time. And those people, ironically, are the most successful. Their plans are the ones that achieve the highest amount of success because they're way out in front of all those potential pitfalls.
You got to throw a dash of... You got to throw a dash of long game strategy into this, because if what I do is, okay, there's no excuses, Dave, you're running this mission, cool, I'm going to direct and I'm going to micromanage you to the point where I promise there'll be no mistakes. Okay, now this is why you got to throw some long game in there, some strategic vision. That's why it's in the strategy section, because if that's what I do, what have you learned? You haven't learned. You haven't figured out how to plan on your own. You haven't figured out how to execute the operation on your own. So even though you're responsible for everything, which you absolutely are, that doesn't mean that you do everything. And by the way, you can't do everything. You don't have the time or the cognitive capacity to handle and make every decision. You can't do it. So taking extreme ownership of everything doesn't mean doing everything yourself and micromanaging and making every decision at all. That's a short term, and like we said earlier, that's like a brute force thing. It can work for a little while. Mm-hmm. Like I could be like, okay, Dave, you're going to talk to a company. Cool. I'm going to go with you. I'm going to write your brief for you. I'm going to, sit in the back row and make adjustments as you talk. Okay, cool. I can do that one time. But what about Mike Sorelli, who's out there? What about Andrew Paul? Am I going to do it for everyone? What about Flynn? What about Lit? Am I going to sit there and no, can't do it. It's impossible to do. So yeah, I'm responsible for what we're saying. I'm responsible for our mission, but I got to make sure that the training is happening, that the knowledge is there, and then you got to take a step back. Speaking of which, I'm jumping to this section called leading from the rear. One of the most common mantras that leaders hear is lead from the front. And it makes sense. After all, some critical things happen when leaders lead from the front. When a leader leads from the front, He or she is setting the example, showing exactly what to do and how to do it. This model can be critical during fear-inducing moments. There are many examples in combat where the situation is dire and it is leadership from the front that changes the outcome. Perhaps there is some open terrain to cross. Maybe there is an enemy sniper waiting to take a shot. Maybe there is a room with enemy fighters behind the door that needs to be entered. Any of these scenarios can cause people to become fearful and freeze. Who wants to risk death? But any of these situations can grow infinitely worse if no action at all is taken. Most types of combat examples prove that someone needs to act. More often than not, that someone is the leader. When no one else has the courage to take action, the leader has to lead from the front. The leader has to charge across the open terrain, maneuver in the enemy's sniper's line of fire, or breach the door to engage enemy fighters. If the leader doesn't take action, no one will. The troops will freeze. The enemy will seize the initiative, get the upper hand, and win. It is not only combat situations where leaders need to lead from the front. In any situation that is stagnated because of fear or apprehension, a leader stepping up and taking action is a solid solution. The same is true of terribly arduous tasks. People tend to shy away from suffering. They will procrastinate and avoid getting started. But when the leader jumps in and starts attacking the job, others will jump in and get started as well. A leader must also lead from the front when it comes to setting a good example, treating people with respect, taking care of one another, and being professional at all times. If the leaders lead in this manner, others will follow. Examples like these prove there are plenty of times when a leader must lead from the front. But there are also times when a leader must lead from the rear, or perhaps from the middle. So, plenty of times where a leader has to lead from the front. That absolutely makes sense. I've seen it. I've done it. It happens. But back to the book, when I served as a SEAL Assault Force commander, I always tried to avoid being one of the first 6 to 8 people to enter a potentially hostile building during an assault. I did this because the first 6 to 8 people would be clearing rooms, perhaps getting in gunfights, and at a minimum, detaining potentially resistant prisoners. In short, the first 6 to 8 people would be heavily engaged in dynamic, fluid situations that required their full attention. If those first assaulters got into a firefight and were immersed in trying to stay alive and eliminate the enemy, who would call for supporting assets? If they were overwhelmed by a large number of detainees, who would call for reinforcements? If possible enemy personnel were seen departing the building, who would notify the external security elements that this was happening? In any of those cases, while the assault team was dealing with the immediate tactical problem, someone else had to lead. In those situations, it was on me to lead. My job was not to clear rooms, engage targets, or grapple with detainees. My job was to detach, assess all the dynamics of the situation, and get my men the support they needed. So when I approached a building, if I happened to end up as one of the people toward the front of the assault team, I would step back, high port my weapon, and let some of the other SEALs go in front of me. As soon as my SEALs saw me do that, they immediately knew what was happening and would move past me toward the target. The momentum would not be broken. But it is not only on the battlefield where a leader has to be cautious about leading from too far to the front. Planning is another time it is important to consider where to lead from. Instead of the leader coming up with a plan, the preferred method is to let the team members come up with a plan. Let it be their idea. When the leader allows the team members to come up with a plan, those members have already bought into it. There is no need to convince them of it. Of course, if the planning process gets bogged down or different members of the team can't agree on a course of action, it might be necessary for the leader to step in and provide guidance or even make a decision on which course of action to use. So, and it just closes this out, but it is almost always preferred for the leader to lead from the rear, to allow the troops to take lead on the plan and to take ownership of it. The best ideas often come from the people on the team who are closest to the problem. Those are the folks on the front line. Don't inhibit them. Instead, allow them the freedom and authority to create and execute new plans and ideas. They have the knowledge, give them the power. Don't feel the need to always lead from the front. Take a step back and let your team lead. Yeah, it's, Dave, you've been working with me long enough that you probably seen me. How long have we been working together now?
3 years.
3 years. You probably see me, I'm going to guess, 7 times in 3 years. Have something going on and me say, all right, here's what we're doing. What do you think? Is that a good assessment?
Yeah, 7 or less.
7 or less.
Yeah.
7 or less. And this is a lot of things.
A lot of things.
A lot of, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of decisions
Yes.
that get made at echelon front. And 7 times it's been contentious enough or bogged down enough where it's like, okay, well, now we're not actually making progress and nothing's happening. And it's like, okay, guys, here's what we're doing. And, it's the same thing that when I was on a ground force commander, an assault force commander, I wasn't going to say anything because the guys knew what to do. And then occasionally they didn't know what to do. And when I talked, people listened.
It's that, I think, more than it being contentious or bogged down. It's actually the few times where, like, you know what, damn, I don't know what to do here. And that little vacuum that gets created is when you step in, typically. Not when, it's not like me and Flynn are arguing or we're Leif and I are arm wrestling over something. You're going to come in and adjudicate it. It's actually when you see, oh, you know what? There's a place that these guys, Dave doesn't actually know what to do here.
Yeah, progress is not being made.
That's right. We're not moving in the direct, and I'm going to step in and do that for him or for the team or whatnot. And then typically the after conversation is, hey, there's some things I could have explained, or there's a way that I could have set you up to be more successful in that situation. But the comment of it's almost always preferred to lead from the rear, that is met with heavy resistance. We use a version of that. I explain that to the key, when we work in a lot of companies, a lot of times we're working with really senior leaders, C-suite, executives, CEOs, high level in the organization. They don't like the idea of not leading from the front. And what they typically complain about the most is that they don't have enough time. Too many things, and it's always that they can't get everything done that they want to get done, and it's for that reason alone is that they're in charge of everything, which is why they don't have time and why their teams are underperforming and why they're struggling and why they need that help. But that comment of that's preferred a lot of times to not be in the front is there's a kind of that immediate reaction of, I don't like the way that sounds. You have to explain what that means.
Yep. Yeah, because you get told that all the time. I mean, how common is the phrase "lead from the front"? Lead from the front.
Day one, Marine Corps training, lead from the front. Day one, especially in officer training, like that is it from the beginning. And we are complimented on this Iron Mike. He's out in front. He's got his arm up. He's pointed with a weapon. It's the follow me mantra, mindset that's all throughout military training. And just like you described, that doesn't mean that you don't have to set up and do that. But when you're actually supposed to do that is when there's a vacuum and a void.
Right.
That's when you go, hey, I have to get out in front of this.
Yeah.
That happens if your people are well trained and resourced. That doesn't actually happen very often. It actually happens about 7 times every 3 years is kind of the rate that you should be thinking that you need to be out front. Because for the rest of the time, if you're actually doing your job, those vacuums and voids aren't there. Now, if you're adjudicating conflict, those might be some other things, but it's really the vacuums of decisions where your people are like, you know what, boss? I got to be honest with you. I don't know what to do here, or you see or feel that is where you need to get out front. That doesn't happen all that often.
Yeah, which also means, as you said earlier, the minute I have to go, okay, here's where we need to go, I'm 20 seconds later, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm not doing a good job of explaining the intent here.
That's right.
And the team
Why
doesn't
didn't they
understand
know
the
what to
strategy.
do?
Yeah, this is on me, and I need to make that more clear. Which usually, that whatever situation unfolded is a real opportunity to say, hey, look, this is what we need to do, and here's why. So the next time we see this, we know what to do.
And if you've cultivated all these other things that we've been talking about that you wrote about here, those times that you as the leader step in, your team doesn't resent it, and they're not annoyed or frustrated with you. They're thankful and they're glad. So the explanation is way easy. It's a huge deposit, and you don't have to worry about doing those things because nobody pushes back on it. They're actually relieved. Man, I was hitting a brick wall here, and that's actually what I needed, as opposed to he's in my business and tell me what to do, which is the exact opposite of what you're talking about here, which actually happens. If you think you need to be in front all the time, what you're doing more often than not, 93% of the time, you're stepping on people's toes and you're hurting them in the long run, rather than letting them be successful.
Yeah, and we can cover it. I got a whole section on there on when to step up and lead. Like, when do you actually have to fill that leadership vacuum? How do you do it? And this is another one of those things that as I reflected upon, I was like, yeah, here's what it's so obvious to me, but never really articulated it because never really got asked that pointed of a question. Mm-hmm. Never got asked, how do you how do you shoot that weapon? Where do you put your hand? Where do you put your shoulder on that 240 Gulf when you're engaging from a bipod? I never got asked, wait, when is it?
Yeah.
Everyone just sees you do it, and they just think, okay, well, I kind of get that. But no, you need to write that stuff down.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a section that you were talking to me about earlier today. The section is called Don't Care. And it's a form of detachment. And people know about it because of the idea of negotiations, the ability to walk away from negotiations. Oh, you don't want to lower your price? Cool.
Yeah.
I don't
The
care.
willingness to walk away, yeah.
But it's something that you can use as a leader. If you drill down, go into the book, if you drill down on things you care about, you will find that many of them are rooted in ego. Even the simplest examples. So like when you're a leader, not caring is a powerful tool. You want to utilize your plan instead of mine? Cool. I don't care. You want me to do some crappy job for you that others find demeaning? Fine. I don't care. Oh, you want me to give someone else the opportunity to lead a project? Awesome. I don't care. And then I'll give them a bunch of support. That's what it is. And then once again, this kind of ties back into this idea of like this supreme level of confidence, which is when you can put your ego in check, when you can subordinate your ego, it's because you have confidence.
Yeah, and not caring when you're supremely confident is different than not caring.
Yes, it's totally different.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are like clickbait titles, aren't they? Don't care and lead from the rear.
Yeah.
Those are clickbait titles. I just realized. Maybe I'll have to make Echo. Can you make a couple of videos with those? Don't care and lead from the rear.
Yep.
There you go. Clickbait. But to your point, even though they sound clickbait, and they almost. I mean, can you imagine going in the Marine Corps and being like, okay, lead from the rear and don't care. Like that's the opposite of everything that you would learn as a leader.
Yeah.
So, and not to mention, we talked for already 20 minutes today about the fundamental thing that you're doing as leaders, caring about your people. So, yeah, you have to read and fully understand what we're talking about here.
Yes. In that section, you got to read all those details. The idea of when you say, I don't care about you asking me to do a demeaning task, it means I'll do anything. Yeah. I don't care what it is because I'm here to help the team win, not the passive aggressive, I don't care, and not caring.
It was fun. The last muster in Australia, there was a lot of this going on, and it was cool because you rewind 3 or 4 musters ago, and all of a sudden, someone's saying, "I want my slide here," or "Hey, I want to use this font," or I need this much time to cover this topic. And this time, it was just, "Hey, how much time do you need to cover that?" I don't care. I remember there was some conversation, and I think Jamie was like, hold on. She was doing the calculation for how much time each person gets for each slot. And she's like, wait, Jocko, this thing that I gave you 45 minutes, can you cover it? It actually turns out to be only 20 minutes. And I was like, cool, don't care. Like, it literally doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You want me to, I'll talk about the subject for 20 or 45. It's fine. And, oh, wait, someone else wants to cover that topic? Cool. I don't care. Let's do it. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah. Or it'd be easier for these guys if they did it this way, but it can affect you a little bit.
Cool. I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I'll bite the bullet.
Is it easier for them? Do it. No factor. Don't care.
Yeah, that is a great attitude to have. Great attitude to have. Man, it makes your life easy. I mean, think about if you impose that, or not impose it, but think if you utilize that with your wife, right?
Got to be careful though. The
wording,
tones.
Yeah. And there's also trap. I mean, we're getting real specific in the domestic scenarios unfolding. Yes. This will make my wife mad. Yeah. What do you want for dinner? Don't care. Yeah. That actually, my wife doesn't like that. Yeah. So what do I want for dinner? Well, steak, girl. Let's go to a steakhouse. Yeah. That's cool. And then she can lead by negation, right? No, I don't want steak. Right. Cool. Let's go get something else, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like don't care. Saying that and being like that is different if someone really wants an actual answer from you.
There's got to be a better way to phrase it in a domestic scenario. So I think the way you phrase it in a domestic scenario is right here. That sounds good.
Sounds good. Yeah. But
think about that.
Technically not the same as I don't care.
I know, but doing it well, mentally.
Right.
You're there.
Same attitude.
Mentally, it's the same thing. Right. Hey, do you want to watch this rom-com tonight?
I don't care what we watch. as long as I'm with you.
Yeah, that's good. But you know what I'm saying is better?
That's good. That's advanced.
Is that sounds good.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Now,
that's
my
better.
wife might not buy it on the rom-com.
Yeah,
No,
I'm pretty sure
But
she
that's
knows
what I'm
you're
saying.
saying
So
there.
let's go domestic scenario. I'm gonna say that's good. Oh no, that sounds good. Because hey, do you want to go out to the foo-foo new Italian restaurant? Sounds good. Just think of that right there. Look, you might not even eat because you're not going to go out. You're not going to go out and say, hey, I want to get can you just inject me with diabetes right now with a plate of pasta? You're not thinking that. But you know what? What is it worth? Because the reality is, order the chicken parmesan and don't eat the pasta. What? Mm-hmm. Borderline, but we're still good. We're still in there. We're still like maintaining.
Yeah. Well,
So
again,
that sounds
Is this
good.
hitting close to home right now, man?
again, I don't, because technically it fundamentally goes against pretty much anything, well, in my situation, that my wife even lives for. Like the whole idea, I don't care, bro, you got to care. That's
what I'm
thing.
saying. That's why it sounds good.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that's correct.
But
yeah.
it's the same attitude, but you keep that, you keep that under wraps, Echo Charles.
Yes, sir.
Just, hey, that sounds good. Hey, what is she? Oh, yeah. Does your wife likes to watch reality television?
From time to time.
Right. So when she says, hey, hon, Real Housewives of Orange County 7 is on.
My man. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to watch it? That sounds good.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, she would never ask
Play
that,
the game
but
a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Good tips for sure.
Check. Next section. Know what is important and what isn't. One of the things that distinguishes a black belt in jiu-jitsu from a white belt is the black belt's understanding of what is important and what isn't. A black belt sees past insignificant movements, ignores trivial actions, and focuses on what actually matters. A good commander on the battlefield does the same thing. The commander can tell when the enemy is shooting. When the enemy shooting is merely reconnaissance by fire. A good commander understands when the enemy movement is just a ploy. A good commander ignores things that will not have an impact on the battle. Like the black belt and the battlefield commander, any good leader must be able to do the same thing, discriminate between what is important and what is not. For a leader in any situation, changes are everywhere, both external and internal. External changes can occur in the environment, the behavior of the enemy, the market, the weather, or the timing of a scenario. Internal changes can be emotions of individuals, relationship dynamics, or the morale of the team. Change is the reality of life. Almost everything is in constant state of flux, and it is crucial. It is a crucial part of the leader's job to figure out which changes are important and which changes are mere distractions. This is not always easy to do. I see leaders get caught up in all the time in things that do not matter. They waste their time and energy on meaningless events or minor problems that will not impact the overall results they are trying to achieve. A black belt in jiu-jitsu is a master of energy conservation. Not one movement is wasted defending against attacks that do not matter. Leaders must do the same thing. Try to give a little insight on how to actually do this. A good leader detaches and elevates above the tactical situation where they can see what really matters. Before they dive into a problem, they ask themselves questions. How will this problem impact the team's strategic goals? Can it cause mission failure? Is it worth my time and effort to engage in? How bad can it get if I leave it alone? The answers to such questions should make it obvious to a leader if a problem requires their involvement. A good rule to follow is that the leader should err on the side of not getting involved in problems. The goal is always to allow problems to get solved at the lowest level. When subordinates are solving low-level problems, it allows the leader to focus on more important strategic issues. So there you go. And of course, there's a dichotomy with that, because if you become too detached and you don't pay attention to any of the problems, you can have some issues.
Yeah.
The next section is called principles. And again, we're getting more and more granular, like as each section goes by. Talk about who's the most important team member in a team.
Yeah, just we've said it already, but just kind of revisiting. This is all under strategy. Mm-hmm. These are all the frame of minds. This is all the mindsets you as a leader should have for all these things. This isn't prescriptive in every single situation. There is a dichotomy with everything, and there are circumstances which will drive you to be heavily involved in things. but it's the mindset of how do I want to view my role as a leader as it applies. That's the strategic part of this and why it fits in there. And that's why if you don't know and you're looking for a place to bias in that direction doesn't mean 100% of the time. That isn't the answer all the time. And this isn't the tactical solution of what's going on. It's how you should perceive your role as a leader and what your bias should be. And then the tactical situation might change and you might need to get more or less involved and do a whole bunch of different things. And that certainly comes later. But that mindset, and we kept saying frame of mind from the beginning, is crucial to understanding why this sits in the book the way it does.
Even shooting a 240 Gulf with a bipod, there are times when you are going to whatever. Mm-hmm. You are going to get that thing off the bipod and shoot it. There's things that you're going to do. You have to understand that what the strategy is, and then yes, absolutely right. You have to use your brain.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the more you understand the strategies and the more tactics you know and understand, the more effectively you can use your brain to overcome some of these scenarios that unfold in the real world.
Yeah. The lower down in the organization, the more tactical the behaviors of those people are. And to the point that sometimes you might have a machine gunner that really doesn't understand much of the big picture at all. But when you have the times to go down there after they've made some tactical decision, especially if it's a good tactical decision, and you can explain, hey, what you did made a huge impact upstream in the organization. You made a massive a support for the larger strategic goal. When you can make the connection for them and they recognize how what they're doing, this tiny little task that seems almost menial or small, actually contributes to the big picture, how powerful that is to be able to continue to be more and more and more detached, and they continue to do things without your help because they know what they're doing and how it affects the connection between their tactics and the strategy. Your ability to explain that makes huge headway with them.
So we get into section 3 and again, talk about the most important team member, talk about span of control so people understand what the best way is to do that. Talk about taking care of your people with discipline. Discipline is the best way to take care of your people. From day one, as a leader in the military, you are told over and over again that you have to take care of your people. But some leaders get confused about what that means. They think taking care of your people means making sure they are comfortable and happy, coddling them, giving them as much time off as possible and not pushing them hard. This is wrong. In fact, the opposite is true. In the SEAL teams, if you really care about your people, you won't coddle them at all. You will push them hard. You will train them hard. You will make sure they understand the tactics of war and the weapons and radios they will operate. You will ensure they are in top physical condition and prepared for the mental and emotional stress of combat. You'll do everything in your power to prepare them for combat so you can give them the highest probability that they and the rest of the team return from the battlefield. If you really care about your people, you want them to go home to their families. The best way to make that happen is through hard training that comes from discipline. The same thing is true in business. While lives might not be on the line, if you really want to take care of your people, you need to push them. You need to make sure they understand their jobs. You need to drive them toward their goals. If they fail professionally, they fail to achieve their financial goals, and they cannot take care of their families or provide for them the way they want to. So when you are a leader, the best thing you can do is push them toward their goals. And of course, this drive has to be balanced. And then the reason I kind of had to put that in there, because I wanted to go a little bit deeper on imposed discipline. Because I say over and over again that discipline shouldn't be imposed on people. And it usually has a bad outcome, or at least has a negative taste. It leaves a negative taste in people's mouths when you impose discipline on them. So going back to the book, optimal discipline in a team is not imposed by the leader. It is chosen by the team itself. Optimal discipline is self-discipline, but teams do not always have self-discipline. They may not understand the rewards that come with it. When that happens, it may be necessary for a certain level of discipline to be carefully applied and imposed so the team understands the benefits. And I kind of go through how you do that. How do you impose that discipline without leaving a bad taste in everyone's mouth?
Yeah. Good
methodology. It's also a good way, this kind of leads into the next topic, which is pride. Because pride is a powerful force. When people have pride, it it can change an organization. Going back to the book, if there is pride, the team polices itself. The team will not allow substandard performance. Anyone who slacks off is corrected not by the leadership, but by the team itself. That is the power of pride. What then of a team that lacks pride? Perhaps it doesn't have a storied history. Perhaps it doesn't have a history of victory to hold high. What then? It is one of the most critical tasks as a leader to instill pride in your team. How do you do that? How can you build the morale of troops and create the strong bonds of pride that result in an attitude where everyone on the team gives more than what is required? Because that's the truth right there, right? You have a team that has pride, they're giving more. And they're self-policing. You have a team that doesn't have pride, they're giving the minimum.
The minimum. The self-policing part of that is so powerful. When you don't need to impose any correction on your team simply because they care enough to do it themselves.
Yep. As I've talked about on this podcast before, the amount of times that I had to talk to a guy in task unit bruiser because they were late is zero, right? Was guys late? Yeah, but it never made it to me.
Right.
They were getting tightened up on the front lines, right? Oh, a guy doesn't have his gear squared away? Cool. Did you think I was down there counseling that person? No, they were getting tightened up. Old school. They were not going to make that mistake again. Why? Pride. So how do you establish pride? Back to the book. The answer is simple. You give them the opportunity to earn it. Pride does not develop simply by telling team members that they are great or by hanging up banners. All the banners and signs and flags mean nothing if they aren't earned. To build pride within a team, you have to put the members in situations that require unity, strength, and perseverance to get through. You have to push them in training to a point where they are truly tested, and in that, they will develop pride in what they have accomplished. Skipping forward to another section here. It's called Yes Men. As a leader, you should not want to be surrounded by yes men. People who agree with everything you say. As a subordinate, you should not be a yes man. So this is like the counter to the whole initial part of this conversation, talking about, hey, boss, yes, I got this. Yep, boss, I got that. Yep, you want me to do that extra paperwork. Yep, you want to cover there. Yeah, that's totally true. And here we go in the other direction. As a subordinate, you should not be a yes man. You should speak up when something doesn't make sense. This concept sometimes worries leaders. Because essentially, what I am saying here is that subordinates should always be pushing back against their leaders, always asking their leaders why things are being done a certain way, and always offering up information and recommendations from their perspective on the front line. That scares some leaders. Some leaders would rather just have their subordinates do exactly what they are told to do, but that is a bad idea. So I get this all the time. That makes people nervous. But the problem is when you're surrounded by yes men, it's your brain against the world, and your brain is not strong enough. You're going to make bad plans, bad decisions, and if all you have is a bunch of people that say, yes, boss, you're right, you're going to end up in a bad situation.
Yeah, and leaders who aren't surrounded by yes men, who are surrounded by people who are willing to push back, worst case scenario for them is things don't go well. They regroup, they come up with it to solve the problem, they move forward. They might have some back and forth, but it's not catastrophic. If you're surrounded by yes men, when you finally fail, again, it's going to be catastrophic because there'll be nobody there left to help figure out what it is that you need to do. So the recognition too as a leader that if you actually really care about winning, which a lot of times drives the ego, the worst way to do it is surround yourself by yes men, because when you fail, you'll fail catastrophically. And you don't have that in organizations where people push back, that's the fear. Like I don't want people pushing back against my plans because I think I might look dumb. Actually, you do, because what you really want to do is be successful. And that catastrophic failure is what you see with companies and teams where everybody just, whatever you want, boss, whatever you say, boss, in a way that's not constructive, but just whatever they want to hear to just kind of move past it. The failures they see is when companies, they lose everything.
Yeah. Do not surround yourself with yes men. And that means don't be one. Now, this doesn't mean that you form bad relationships with your boss. And I actually, in the book, explain how to do that. What does this sound like? So you'll have the ability to speak properly and not develop an antagonistic relationship with your boss. You can get that in the book. One more little section here. for this part of the book, for the strategy part. The exception to no bad teams, only bad leaders. In Extreme Ownership, we wrote that there were no bad teams, only bad leaders. We were not the first people to make this claim. Napoleon said there were no bad regiments, only bad colonels. And U.S. Army Colonel David Hackworth said in his book About Face that there were no bad units, only bad officers. Yet there are still people who feel that a bad team is a legitimate excuse for bad performance. This is simply not true. There are no situations and no exceptions where a subordinate is ultimately responsible for the performance of a team. It is always the leader's fault. And hey, imagine what I went through to write that sentence. That's a bold sentence. There are no situations and no exceptions where a subordinate is ultimately responsible for the performance of a team. It is always the leader's fault. Believe me, I have racked my brain. Hopefully, maybe someone will come up with an example where that's wrong. I haven't figured one out yet. Going on. That being said, there is an exception to the rule that there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. The exception is that it is possible to have a good team that delivers outstanding performance despite a bad leader. How does that happen if leadership is the most important thing in the success or failure of a team? It happens when there are subordinates in the team who lead regardless of their rank. They are tactful individuals who know how to lead despite not having been given official authority. And this is what you've been talking about a bit today, Dave, already, which is, look, you can have a bad leader and the team is good and they want to get the job done and they believe in the mission and they will win despite bad leadership. Despite bad leadership. All right, so we're approaching 3 hours, I think, right now. And we just finished. So that good place to take a break. And we will get back. So we finished the strategy part of leadership strategy and tactics. And on the next podcast, we will cover part 2, leadership tactics. In the meantime, I guess if you like listening to us, I'm going to be talking some more at some live events around the country.
Cool.
Does that sound like a tour?
Yes.
Classic.
It's a tour.
Classic example of what not to do. What did I do? I said, hey, we're not a rock band. We're not going on tour. And guess what I'm doing now? Going on tour. Kind of. Doing some live gigs. January 6th in D.C., January 11th in Austin, January 16th in New York, January 20th in LA, January 27th in Seattle, and January 28th in SF. Some of the gigs are already sold out. Go to joccolive.com if you want to come and get engaged. It's called Decisive Engagement. That's the name of the event.
The tour.
Decisive Engagement. Yeah, the events, the tour.
It's a tour.
It's the Decisive Engagement Tour.
Tour. Yep, straight up.
So I will be talking. I will be answering questions, meeting with you. Looking forward to it. We'll get into those cities and hanging out with y'all. And what else? We talked a bunch about leadership today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about leading ourselves? Is there anything, what can we do to lead ourselves?
We can do many things. Not a lot, but some jiu-jitsu references.
Yeah.
In the old leadership strategy.
Once again, amazing how jiu-jitsu is a thread that runs through everything.
Jiu-jitsu is life.
Yeah.
So participate in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you're joining jiu-jitsu. We're doing jiu-jitsu. Still people every day, daily, semi-daily, twice daily. Sometimes people saying, hey, I am either thinking about it or I just joined.
Mm-hmm.
So when you join, you're going to need a gi. This is less of a question, by the way, because we all know this. So we're going to get an Origin gi. Get it from originmain.com. Rash cards as well for no gi.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Boom. Jiu-jitsu, that's one thing. Is wearing jeans a way to get better?
I will say this. If you're wearing jeans that allow you complete freedom of movement, right? That's one thing we try to do to the enemy in a war. We try and limit their freedom of movement.
Yes, and jiu-jitsu, by the way.
The jiu-jitsu, we try and limit our opponent's freedom of movement. So why would you actually voluntarily put on a garment that restricts your freedom of movement? You don't want to do that. That's why getting Origin jeans, which have stretch in them.
Sure.
You can't tell from looking at them. It's not like you look at them and you go, oh, those are kind of some high fashion thing. No, they look like a pair of work jeans. But guess what? You're fully mobile. You're not pinned down.
It's like fashion.
No.
When you're wearing them, you don't, I'm just saying you kind of can smell some fashion on them.
Depends on who's wearing them.
Me.
Okay, yeah. But you kind of stink of fashion.
When my lovely wife is giving me a thorough evaluation of my aesthetic value at any given time while wearing these Origin jeans, the fashion element is prevalent.
Well, good.
There you
So
go.
I'm glad you like that. But to answer your question,
Yes, sir.
because I wasn't talking about fashion, I was talking about function. Functionally, yes, we're good to go. This is a positive thing. This is a positive thing in your life.
Yeah.
On top of that, why not do something where you are actually helping the country that you live in become a better place?
Yeah, that's true.
Why would you not do that? Why would you not support the very country that provides you with the freedom to move? So you get a pair of jeans that give you the freedom to move, and then you support the nation
Yep.
that provides you with that freedom to move, the freedom to do jiu-jitsu.
I'm going to come to Echo's defense just a little bit here.
Thank you.
Because you guys both know, I can't give away my source, but I might already have those jeans you're talking about with that little stretch, little mobility.
They all
in it.
have that little mobility
Yeah,
stretch.
I got a little advanced.
You got Delta 68s?
Yes.
Okay, check.
Sorry.
Oh, that's cool.
I got it.
I
about
don't.
big time,
But
so.
Dave does. Okay.
I got it.
All right.
And you guys both know I don't do jeans. I do shorts, and basically 99% of the time. I gave the caveat was, well, if I ever got a pair of jeans I ever wanted to wear, maybe I'd wear jeans. Well, they showed up. I put them on. My wife, who I honestly do not know the last time she's seen me wear a pair of jeans. It is years. She said, dang, those look good.
Yeah.
That was the first thing she said. So I understand where you're coming from. Now,
There
I
you
didn't
go.
wear them
There
for
you
the
go.
fashion, but the first words out of her mouth were, those look good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Undeniable fashion. Undeniable. I
Is
mean,
there a
not
difference,
that it's
is
like.
there a difference between they look sharp and fashion?
Yeah, you got triggered by the fashion word.
Yeah, I
Let's
did.
face it. Sorry,
I
bro.
did.
Sorry. Hey, that's saying a lot. Dave Burke came shooting at the gun range with me. Straight up shorts, flip flops. So that I can confirm that whole notion that he does not wear jeans, and shorts and flip flops are his main. What do you say? Mode situation. Nonetheless, yes, that is true about the jeans. I don't have the Delta 68.
You should be getting them soon. They're in production. Well, actually, they're live right now. By the time this podcast comes out, we
Well,
should
that's
be live.
interesting. I'm just saying Dave has them.
Yeah. You know what you should do? Build better relationships with people. Because apparently someone's winning over there.
I know, bro.
Building good relationships, and he's not doing it. He's not doing it so he can get jeans. That happens to be a byproduct.
Yes,
Delta 68.
look at this
so
guy.
We're talking
Holy
about
cow.
Delta 68 jeans are the lightweight jeans. There's regular jeans, which is like when I go to Montana, I wear the regular jeans. When I am in Southern California or the more temperate regions of America, and actually most of the time, it's the Delta 68 lightweight jeans.
Right. It's good, man. I look forward to that. Brian, Pete. Oh, you got wait. That would be Pete.
Yes,
Not Brian.
that would be Pete.
Well, both of you guys. Just side note. I'm
Or
looking
somebody
forward
else.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said
A real
somebody else.
real player would know the people on the front lines.
And for you, Echo, just as you're looking, projecting down the road
Sure,
of your
projecting.
relationship building,
Yes.
when things show up unrequested or unsolicited, that means you're winning.
That's when
You got to
you
go
know.
out and ask
Yeah.
for them and say,
That's
"Get
like-
these to me."
I know.
You're not winning as much as when, like, "Wow, thank you very much for this."
Yeah.
You know
my
what's interesting
passive.
is, I mean, what's interesting is when is the last time you just shipped a nice little box of, Jocko podcast T-shirts out to Pete?
Yeah, that's true.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
He's looking at you like, well,
Yeah, we don't even have a relationship.
no
really.
quid pro quo here.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Hey, these are all good tips. Hey, I'm learning.
Check.
You ever find when people say, "Hey, I'm learning," like almost like a cop out for their bad behavior. Hey, I'm still learning.
I haven't really thought about it, but I just kind of felt that.
Shit, I felt it too, man. Anyway, jeans are awesome, regardless of my relationship or lack thereof with Pete and Brian and everyone at Origin.
Speaking of supplementation, We also have supplementation at Origin. And actually, speaking of triggered, Dave Berke, Mr. Hey, try and keep it clean and professional, in one of the outtakes was describing how much he liked strawberry milk, and he dropped an F-bomb.
Yeah.
I mean, like a full-fledged,
I did.
with authority and passion.
Yeah.
Well, for the people who know me and how almost never I say that word, certainly in public setting, that just indicates how much I still like strawberry milk.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
And you only mix it with milk, strawberry milk, and shake it up and you're good.
That's it. I hear all these stories of all these concoctions everybody's doing. It's milk milk in a cup.
And you just,
And it's just like,
every time.
Then the F-bomb. Just
That's your jam. Dang.
because I
that's good.
made one the other day, and there's a little violation here. Whatever. I'm coming clean to the world. So you ever eat dinner and you're like, you know what? Not only was it not satisfying in volume, it was also unsatisfying in taste, right? And I'm not going to call out the person that executed this thing that I'm married to, but it was not the deal. So I got done and I had like not just a craving for more food, but tasty food.
Yeah.
So I made this milk. So this is what I did: milk, peanut butter, peanut butter, 2 scoops of peanut butter, and then 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream.
Yeah.
This thing was ridiculous. It was so good that I shared, which is
shared it
just
with
a whole nother thing. I said to my son, I said, hey, you got to try this.
Oh, that okay.
And then because normally if it's just really, really good, this is all mine. I made it.
Yeah.
I paid for it. I created it. It's mine. Right? Hey, go mix one.
Yeah.
This was so good. I said, no, I want to give this away.
You got to share it.
You
Share it with the
got to
world.
try this.
Yeah, makes sense.
And you know what he said when he drank it? Oh my God.
Yeah. But you shifted to a little bit of short term there.
In
Little
what way?
short term with the ice cream, man. The ice cream.
Yeah.
Shifted.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Not too much though. That's kind of the good thing.
I think what it was you get that caloric deficit.
Oh yeah.
Right?
So your
and
body.
I'm just thinking, man, that dinner didn't have enough. So I'm getting crazy. So yeah,
man.
we got supplements. Milk.
Good. Sounds like a justification. But yeah, man. Also a Jocko white tea.
Mm-hmm.
In the event of you wanting something light, if you're in a caloric deficit, this might not help you in that regard. Might not.
Yeah, but it might give you a little kicker.
It'll give you a kicker.
There's some caffeine in it.
Yes, sir.
And will you feel like a food snob and start looking down on other people when you get done drinking a Jocko white tea because it's certified organic? Will you start looking down your nose a little bit at people?
Potentially, yes.
And say, oh, that looks like an interesting snack you're having. Doesn't look very organic to me.
Oh, man. But it is true nonetheless, yes. Also, Jocko has a store. It's called Jocko Store. This is where you can get shirts representative of the path. Directly representative, by the way. Discipline equals freedom. The one I'm currently wearing.
Good deal, Dave.
Good deal, Dave. Good deal.
repping.
Representing big time. Anyway, there's a lot of good stuff on there.
Does your mom have a Good Deal Dave shirt?
Totally.
Does she have 7 of them?
She has 2.
Your mom's fired up.
She
She's
is,
like,
man.
oh yeah, I am representing. We got to make a shirt. We got to make a Good Deal Dave just for her. That's just got your face on it. So she can just be stoked.
My mom sent me a screen capture the other day. She got some sort of thing. Apparently, Facebook tracks this, but when you comment more than other people, you get a notification that you're a top fan.
Top fan. Yeah.
She is one of your top fans. She got notified that she's a Jocko top fan. Screen capture that sent me this that says Arlene is a Jocko top fan.
Yes.
She is in the game, dude.
She is 100% in the game. That is awesome. We need a Good Deal Dave shirt with. And speaking of which, factually, so when's the new Top Gun come out?
Summer of 2020.
Oh man. Okay. Well, we'll do. What's the bet? We need to do a fight recap of it, right?
Yeah.
A breakdown of it.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. And what do you think when will it be out on like Netflix where we can like actually watch it as it's doing it and comment on it without violating the copyright laws or whatever?
Well, actually, no. You can do it whenever. It's long. I don't know if it's in the theater.
No, we need to be able to watch it on a computer.
Right.
So we can
But you
sit
can
right
do it.
here.
It's called commentary, fair use. You can, if you're doing commentary on something, or it's free. You can.
So we're going to absolutely do that. 100%. We're going to sit in here. You're going to go line by line. You're going to explain stuff. I'm going to ask you stupid questions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be all up in. Yeah.
Are you pumped for it?
That's a good idea.
I am totally
You're
pumped.
so pumped for it.
Absolutely.
Wait. So were you? I forget if I asked you this. Were you really into Top Gun, the OG?
Bro, that's why that's his entire life was based on
I mean
that
the
Top
movie
Gun.
though.
You mean when I was 14 and I saw Top Gun, did I think it was cool?
No, well, no, I'm asking like more than that.
Yes.
Like, was that your jam for
That was, yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Because I knew one of my good friends from when I was little, Eric Masters, still pilot too, by the way. Air Force, Top Gun, that was his jam.
I don't
You
care
go to
what-
his house, it's in the VCR.
Doesn't matter what
straight up.
service you're in, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, if you watch Top Gun, that's why you want to be a pilot.
Naval aviator.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was good.
It's kind of interesting. Dave was on the podcast before, and we talked through that entire thing.
Yeah,
and
I know,
explained the
but-
entire thing, and just kind of FYI, the trajectory of Dave's entire life is kind of fundamentally rooted in the movie Top Gun.
But I appreciate the question. So it's cool.
Well, hey man, I'm trying.
I understood.
I'm trying to build the relationship.
And Leif Babin is Navy SEALs. He saw Navy SEALs and was super fired up for Navy SEAls.
Yeah. Well, I used to watch Roadhouse a lot, so I guess maybe
That's how you
it's kind
became
of
a bouncer.
It's kind of the same deal. See what I'm saying? I don't know.
That's good. I like it, man.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Did you kind of
Nonetheless.
see yourself a little Patrick Swayze vibe?
Dalton, bro.
Dalton, I mean.
In a way, but they always, here's the ongoing thing about Dalton. They always tell him, I thought you'd be bigger, so I couldn't relay. My whole thing was not to be the guy who they thought would be bigger. See what I'm saying? Anyway,
Check.
Nonetheless, Jocko Store. Yeah, represent. Go there, jockostore.com. If you like something, get something. Also, subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Is this important? Maybe, maybe not, but it is, we'll say, useful. Stay in the game, right?
Right. Reviews of the podcast. That's a good way to give us feedback.
Yes, sir.
On the podcast. So you can write, hey, I think the support section should be much longer. I don't think I hear you talking enough about Origin Jeans or Milk.
I need way more info. Yeah, you're right.
That's a lot. So if you want to add that to the commentary, go leave a review.
Do it.
Go leave a review. And don't forget, we have other podcasts. We got a podcast called The Grounded Podcast, which Dave Berke has been on. It's not what people expect, apparently. Is it about jiu-jitsu? Kind of. Is jiu-jitsu about life? Very much so.
Yes, sir, it is.
What is it about then? About everything.
Yeah, about life.
Relaxed version. Like you can get relaxed fit jeans if your jeans were constrictive.
I think those are skinny jeans.
Yeah. Well, you can get relaxed fit.
Right.
This is the relaxed fit podcast. Grounded.
Jocko Podcast. So Jocko Podcast is skinny jeans and Grounded
No.
is relaxed fit.
Oh,
Right, I thought that's what you're saying.
No, not at all.
Are you
bro.
sure? Is that what he was saying?
Bro.
That's what he was saying. Oh.
Most certainly
We're
not.
about to start cutting people. Jocko Podcast is the fatigues, is the uniform. All right?
Okay. You're the
Back
man.
off.
You're the man.
You almost caught me right there. Nicely done. And we also have the Warrior Kid Podcast. We got 4 new episodes are out. So check that out. And then there's Warrior Soap, IrishOaksRanch.com, Warrior Kid Soap, Aiden, on a farm. And you know what he learned on a farm? He learned that he needed to make soap so that he could stay clean.
Unreal. Yeah, it's good. Anyway, YouTube. If you want to know what Dave Berke looks like, we have a YouTube channel, video version of this podcast. And yes, there are excerpts just in case you don't want to, necessarily, or I don't want to say if you don't want to sit through the 3, 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 5.5 hours of, whatever we're talking about. I'm not saying that. I'm saying sometimes, maybe we got other stuff to do that day.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. So maybe you can watch some excerpts on YouTube channel. That's what I'm saying.
Also, you can get Psychological Warfare, which is an album which will help you through moments of weakness. Also, you can get FlipsideCanvas.com, Dakota Meyer, from Podcast 115. He has a company where an American company, American-made, graphic representations of the path and other cool-looking stuff. So you can check that out. We've got some books. We've been reviewing Leadership Strategy and Tactics Field Manual. Dave Berke was one of the first people. Actually, I think you might have been the first person to read some semblance of it. I can see by your reactions today, it's approved.
Approved.
And then there's the Way of the Warrior Kid series, Way of the Warrior Kid 1, 2, and 3. Those are all, you know what? You can get your kids on the path right now. You can point them on the path. You're not going to impose discipline on them. You don't even have to. It will work for you. Get your kids, get your nephew, your niece, some random kid down the street. Get those kids the Warrior Kid books. The feedback that I get of the impact that it's having is beyond comprehension. It's awesome. And you can help a kid. You can help a kid so much. Get them those books. If you got a little kid, get them Mikey and the Dragons. So that when the entire world is something to be afraid of, they learn how to overcome fear. And then we got Extreme Ownership and The Dichotomy of Leadership, which are the books that I wrote with my brother Leif Bagman about leadership. Some of the principles that we talked about today, these are the fundamental versions of those. The Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. For the adult that needs to be on the path, that needs the reminder, get that. And then there's Echelon Front, which is our leadership consultancy, where we take all these things that we talk about and we align leaders inside of organizations to work together and win. Go to echelonfront.com for details on that. EF Online. What about EF Online, Dave?
One of the most common questions we get with those companies we're working with is, what do we do when we're not with them? How do we continue to do this? It's really the question is, how do we get reps? Leadership is a skill. It requires reps after reps after reps. And one of the best ways is EF Online, because you can get all the reps you want with you and your team.
EFOnline.com. It is online training, which sounds weak. I need to come up with a better name for it, right? But it is not weak when you do it. I thought it was going to be weak when we first came up with the idea. It was like, okay, well, we'll just kind of suffer through some weak technology. No, it's not. It's totally legit. It's interactive. You actually have to answer questions. You have to actually make decisions. So EFOnline.com. We got the muster, leadership, seminars, events, conventions that the entire Echelon Front team executes. Go to extremeownership.com for details. Muster 2020. This is where we're going to be. We are going to be in Orlando. We are going to be in Dallas, and we are going to be in Phoenix, Arizona. So if you want to come to one of those musters, that's what we're doing. There's only 3 a year. We're not going to go to whatever random town you live in. You're going to have to come to us because we're not a rock band and we're not on tour. I am going on a tour.
Yeah, yes, you are.
And then we have EF Overwatch and EF Legion. Dave, EF Overwatch and EF Legion, what do you think?
Dude, what Mike Sorelli is doing with that, and I told you about a common question we get. The other common question is, hey, I want more people in my organization that are going to be on the path and in the game. What can I do to do that? And if you're in the military looking for a way to do something that contributes every bit as much as it did in uniform, there's a way to do that. There are companies out there that need people like you right now. They need you. And for the companies that don't know where those people are, they actually all intersect in the same place. They intersect right there at what Mike's really built with Overwatch and Legion is where those people are to connect the people that need them and people where they want to be. It is unreal how much that is exploding in recognition, how important that is, man. It's awesome.
And we're doing some things with EF Legion to EF Legion. If you're a vet or you're in right now and you think you're ever going to have some other kind of job or you're ever going to get out of the military, which you are, I hate to tell you, go to eflegion.com right now and get yourself enrolled in the system. We're going to be offering webinars on how to make that transition. You're going to be able to, other companies are going to be able to look at you as a candidate. They're going to be able to see you and you're going to be able to see what they're looking for. So go to eflegion.com for that.
So legit.
And if you still want to hear from us after however many hours we've been talking, then we are all available on the interwebs, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on that Facebook. Dave is at David R. Berke. Echo is at Echo Charles. And I am at Jocko Willink. And to all those military folks out there that are holding the line currently. And when I say currently, I mean right now, right this moment in time, there are folks out there holding the line and protecting freedom and democracy for us. So to all of you right now, thank you for what you're doing. Same thing here at home. We got police and law enforcement and firefighters and paramedics and EMTs and dispatchers and correctional officers and Border Patrol and Secret Service and all those first responders. Same thing. Holding the line. Protecting us here on the home front. And last thing to everybody. This is a book about leadership. And guess what? Everyone is a leader. You're leading your team. You're leading your family. You're leading your friends. That's what you're doing. So pay attention to what you're doing. Get the right frame of mind. And then take that frame of mind and go out there and get after it. And until next time, this is Dave Berke and Echo and Jocko. Out.